This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining the second meeting of the Council on Participatory Democracy. My name is Virginia Fiume, and I am the coordinator of Humans, which is one of the organizations that started this Council on Participatory Democracy as a forum to discuss not only the instruments of participatory democracy, but also how they can be applied for achieving goals of a more democratic, free, and sustainable Europe. We had the last meeting, the first meeting of the Council on Participatory Democracy on the 19th and 20th of March. That was called by a few organizations that I want to mention: Humans, European Alternatives, ESIT Foundation, the Centre d'Action Laïque, and the Good Lobby. This meeting sees the presence of new organizations who are contributing to this council, Alliance for Europe and Oderal. And the idea, the concept of the Council on Participatory Democracy is to have a space where citizens and organizations can have a shared space of analysis, but also imagine the applications of participatory democracy instruments. The existing ones, for example, the European citizen initiatives or the petitions, and new ones, for example, the citizen assemblies, which is going to be one of the bigger topics of today's session, and how these instruments can be used, reformed, and contribute to a broader reform of the European Union policies within the space of the existing treaties, and but also in the space of reimagining even more deep reforms. I'm gonna moderate the different panels. So I'll just give some technical and organizational information on how the council is structured. Today we will have a first round of introductions with some selected speakers, which is gonna guide us through what we did in the last session and what we will discover today, and the projects that we can share, particularly around the citizen assemblies and the Conference on the Future of Europe, but not only. Then we're going to have a session on a topic that is essential for the real participation of citizens, which is knowledge and information about the instruments. And then two other key sessions. One about the designing of technical and societal deliberative processes. This will be facilitated by Michele Fiorillo. And then we will have a special session on, starting from the Conference on the Future of Europe, how we can imagine, based on the experience of different European countries, the construction of a self-organized citizen assemblies. This is going to be guided by Lorenzo Mineo. And again, in the program, you have seen that we have a broad range of speakers that are gonna help us to kick off a conversation around these topics. Tomorrow, we will deep dive into more specific issues. There will be an assembly on the rule of law, which a committee just closed, a European citizen initiative, and are gonna gather together with those who are interested in the topic to reimagine how an initiative for the respect of the rule of law can be kept going in the European Union. Then we will have two sessions, one of civil freedoms with a specific angle on cannabis legalization, and another session on environment, tied to another European citizen initiative, which is stopglobalwarming.eu. And then we will gather together again in a final plenary session. You must have received all the documents and the links in your inboxes. And here you can find the links to some instruments that are going to help us today. In particular, I recommend to have a look at the collaborative notes. Octavian Lazia is going to make sure that we cover there what we say, but I recommend to each speaker and to each participant to try and put there the inputs that they get from this council, because having things on paper always helps to build. And this is something that we really want to become a regular appointment. So without much further ado, let's go through the introductory session. The first person to talk to us is Lorenzo Marsili, who is the director of European Alternatives, who is going to present us an initiative that is happening on the 9th of May that is somehow part of the process that we started also with the Council on Participatory Democracy. And so I let Lorenzo to talk us about what's going to happen the 9th of May and how it fits in the overall discourse of participatory democracy, citizen participation, and reforms of the European Union. And then after him, there will be Marco Cappato. One last bit. You have seen the program is quite tight. There is space for talking for each participant in each session aside the introductory session. And you can, we will see later, but you can write your name if you want to speak in one of the specific panels, and we are going to list down the people that want to intervene during the debate. Now I would leave the floor to Lorenzo Marsili from European Alternatives to kick us off.
Grazie, Virginia. Very briefly, as you say, just to introduce the concept of the 9th of May and maybe connect it to this very important process that the Council on Participatory Democracy has been taking forward for the last couple of months. And allow me to use this occasion to thank you and humans and everybody on this call for having seen through this process in such difficult times, especially for us who are pro-Europeans and are faced with the European Union that is perhaps not living up to our expectations. And it's important that there are spaces such as this one to keep that flame of radical pro-Europeanism alive. To keep the flame alive and also perhaps to think of new methods that we may envisage in the longer term for our pro-European work moving forwards in what will be a transformed context after the emergency phase of the COVID-19 response by the European Union is past. We've come from a past where we thought that the European Union moved on through crises. It's the usual, the method of the European Union was to deepen its integration faced with a crisis of significant magnitude. But perhaps we need to begin thinking about the possibility of that paradigm not really functioning anymore, because we've been now in a decade of crises from 2008 onwards: economic, geopolitical, Ukraine, migration, COVID. And yet these crises haven't really led to a significant deepening of the structural or institutional elements of European democracy and European integration. And that maybe calls upon us to think of different models in which we can keep alive the idea of ever closer union, and also imagine avenues for citizens' participation that don't necessarily rely on the hope of an institutional leap forward anytime soon, because perhaps something is happening to that paradigm, to be something to be thought about. But it's something that's maybe increasingly important, because I've come to the conclusion that the rising Euroscepticism in Italy, and it's really quite significant if you look at the opinion polls for what they're worth. You see 49% of the people who would be in favor of leaving the European Union. You see 45% of respondents thinking that Germany is their enemy. There is really a withering away of what used to be a very powerful European sentiment in Italy. Part of that withering away, I think, has got to do with the high expectations that Italians had when it came to the European Union. Expectations about the European Union being a political project and not just an economic market, that were certainly more ambitious than the common sense that you had in other European countries. I'm thinking of Spain, I'm thinking of France. And there is this sense of the EU not living up to the story that one has been sold about it in the recent past. And that juxtaposition, that sense of being let down is I think, a component of this quite dramatic and worrying fueling of Eurosceptic sentiment in Italy above all. I say all of this because what we're trying to do with the 9th of May is to create a single occasion, a single day of mobilization, a festival, a day where we can speak about Europe in a different way, using different languages, but also, as Virginia was saying, to contribute to initiating a longer term process that might create a citizens' counterpower to a European Union that appears institutionally deprived of sufficient momentum to make a significant step forward in its integration, and that also requires perhaps new innovative ways of thinking of citizen participation beyond the pre-existing channels that we see in the context of this crisis are simply not sufficient, and in fact risk to some extent also contributing to this sense of despondency and dissatisfaction with the EU, which then becomes Euroscepticism and ultimately nationalism. So the longer term process is what we've all been discussing for a while. It's this idea of how can we seize upon what used to be the Conference on the Future of Europe to imagine a citizens' conference on the future of Europe, or a citizens' assembly, a space that is autonomous or parallel with the institutional setting, and that can re-enfranchise a European citizenry that feels increasingly detached from this institutional project, and maybe also put in some of that space for ambitious thinking that I'm afraid will not have much room for maneuver in the European Council that's about to open as we speak right now. And the 9th of May, to close on this, is obviously Europe Day, and it's obviously Europe Day in a moment in time where the idea of Europe risks really being deprived of much meaning in the eyes of increasingly many people. And so we said, let's try to seize on this day, let's try to take over the Day of Europe and create a mobilization that can function as an accelerator for the longer term processes that we're discussing of citizens' assemblies, so on and so forth, but that can also reclaim the space for talking about Europe away from just the institutional mechanisms of the Eurogroup, the European Council, the discussions on Corona bonds, on Euro bonds, and the rising nationalism that this discussion, unfortunately, is fueling. Let's try to group together, gather our energies, and create a day where we take the word on Europe and we introduce a different way of speaking about Europe from what the newspapers are leading on in these weeks. And so on the 9th of May, we're working to organize a series of events. Of course, there will be online events, including events such as this one that we're all taking part in today. There will be events organized with cultural centers like a theater in Berlin, a foundation in Italy, that will take place throughout the day online in a structure that maybe Virginia can then share with us, or I can send you a link, mixing plenary moments and multiple spin-off events in different languages, also allowing for the plurality of languages that obviously make up Europe. But on top of organizing online events, we said, let's try to make this day, as I mentioned, a day where we reclaim the word about Europe, where we reclaim a speaking presence about Europe. So let's work with the media to make sure that some of our ideas regarding Europe go out of our own bubble of pro-European organizations and manage to contaminate with a radical and captivating discourse mainstream media. So we're making contacts, and I invite all of us to try and think in this direction with media across the European Union. In Italy, for instance, the radio of the national broadcaster RAI, Radio 3, would be a partner, a weekly magazine like L'Espresso in Italy, in Germany, historic radio like Deutschlandfunk, many more that I won't bother you with now at the moment. But the idea is to build this platform of media that accept to take content produced by the network of organizations that we put together, and that are willing to publish or broadcast this content on the 9th of May Europe Day. So and I close with this, to think of our role in the 9th of May, both as collective organizers of activities where we can come together and think about the path forward, but also as collective organizers of content that is then provided to media platforms and that might bring some of our ideas to a wider constituency, and might help to transform a debate on Europe that's becoming increasingly uninspiring and unfortunately spiraling towards increasing Euroscepticism, the centralization of the entire debate on Eurobonds, into something that can maybe be more imaginary, more hopeful, more articulate, and also longer term. So I invite us all to think of the 9th of May as an occasion for us to go out in the public and go out in the media, also through these facilitation agreements that we're building to bring our ideas to as wide a public as possible.
Thank you, Lorenzo Marsili. also because both the Council on Participatory Democracy, this appointment in May, are really revealing themselves as and probably the coronavirus crisis couldn't happen in a better way to a certain extent, to really try and create a critical mass. I think everyone feels the urgency of trying to do things together and feed the work of each other with the analysis and the efforts and the resources that are available. And I think this is something that can't be wasted. Talking about connections, I leave the floor now to Marco Cappato, who is the founder of Humans, civil rights activist in Italy, former MEP. And I asked him to help us to put this Council on Participatory Democracy in the broader context of what is happening, but also to help us to understand how it's important that participatory democracy is part of a positive injection toward representative democracy. I think this is a key element of what we're doing. And so Marco Cappato on stage.
Thank you very much, Virginia, and good afternoon to everybody. And thank you in particular to Lorenzo Marsili, because his introduction, it really does help all of us in having one very specific, very precise appointment and a date on which together we can work, bringing on each and one of us our own experience and our own proposals in a common occasion of presenting it to the public, outreach, going, not just discussing among each other, but trying to reach public opinion. And this is a crucial methodological point that it is helping us very much in the endeavor that we have in front of us. Well, when Lorenzo said, of course, it will be only online event, I started thinking immediately that maybe we could add something physical, of course, in full respect of the security norms, but maybe some I don't know, showing of flag, of even presence in the public place, of course, maintaining the security distance. Maybe there is also something that we could think about. But I stop here with this reasoning. Maybe we can discuss it together. But the first thinking that I have in my mind is that the 9th of May should have been the beginning of the conference on the future of Europe. Well, I don't know, maybe interrupt me if you have more information than I have, but I didn't see a formal act of suspension or postponing of it. I don't know if anybody knows more about it, but this is worse than postponing it. Is the idea that there will be a wide acceptance of the fact that in time of crisis, these kind of things are not urgent. Is a kind of the idea of rethinking Europe is a kind of luxury good that we can allow ourselves in a time of normality, but in time of emergency, it's important that we keep doing things, people in power, without disturbing them too much. The occasion of the 9th of May, I think, it would be exactly that also for us. Because if a COVID-19 emergency is posing threats to democracy in general, we have seen parliament's marginalization and also postponing of election, it is in particular damaging citizen direct participation at an even greater extent. I see what is happening in Italy, popular initiatives at local or national level, referendum, citizen assemblies, popular legislative proposals are made impossible in the very moment in which they would be more needed to assist and control the people in power, because you would need authorization to collect signatures or to hold a public demonstration, and you will not obtain the authorization to do it. So while democracy is considered a waste of time by many people, unfortunately, but still an obligation, well, with some exception, as what is happening in Hungary. Participatory democracy is widely dismissed and suspended, as I said before, as a luxury we cannot afford. This could be one of the greatest mistakes of the current crisis, to miss the opportunity to innovate also the functioning of our democracy. We are talking, well, the public talk is concentrating a lot on the problem of innovation in the health system, in the productive system, in research, but it seems no that important the idea of innovating democracy, fostering inclusive digital solutions for citizen participation to be integrated with traditional tools. So I think we have to discuss, well, this is also the point for the meeting of today and tomorrow, innovation in participatory democracy. As the agenda of today foresees, I think that the first point of innovation is information, knowledge. I think we should start together, all of us, different groups, start to ask for the next EU budget to have adequate fund for information about European citizen initiatives, petitions, and so on. There is no reason why the European Union is helping knowledge and information to explain to the people when and how they have to go to the ballot, to go to vote for European election, but there is no serious investment to let the citizens know how can they participate through European initiatives, petition, or the European Ombudsman, and so on. So knowledge is the first reform, and we don't need to change the EU treaties to obtain adequate information about participatory democracy. As well as the other key point to reform a tool of democracy is to use it. I think we should share experiences on how we are already using the instrument of European participatory democracy at the national, regional, local, and European level. We as humans, we are busy with the collection of signature on stopglobalwarming.eu, the campaign in order to having a European carbon price to fight climate change. Many other initiatives and experiences are going on. So the first way of reforming participatory tools is to use them at the maximum extent as possible. And the meeting of the 9th of May, in a way, it will be something like that. There is no official conference on Europe, on the future of Europe. In a way, we are maintaining the date. We are maintaining the point. This is the good moment to discuss about the future of Europe, for the reason that Lorenzo already said, so I don't want to repeat on that. But this, of course, first thing is to give health response, economic response in the emergency for people who are risking their life or who are losing their jobs. But the second important thing is to start the reflection on how our institution could better function in order to involve the citizens. There is a connection between crisis and citizens information and participation. I know very well the experience in Italy, and I don't want to talk about experience that I don't know. But one thing that is really missing in the Italian debate is information about what is happening. The government is issuing, taking measures without discussion in the parliament, without real knowledge for the public opinion, and this is making, this is creating a lot of frustration in the public opinion about what's going on. So I think we have to keep the agenda, and thank you again to Lorenzo and European Alternatives for the opportunity of the 9th of May. And I think that this meeting of today and tomorrow morning could exactly prepare some material and ideas that could be used during the meeting of the 9th of May. Thank you, Virginia.
Thank you, Marco Cappato. We have other 15 minutes to close this round of introductions, and now I'm gonna take the floor myself because one of the key output of the first meeting of the Council on Participatory Democracy was a petition to the European Parliament. As Marco was mentioning, the better way to make sure that participatory democracy is in the right radar and in the toolbox of citizens and institutions is to use it. So the output of the last meeting of the Council on Participatory Democracy was a petition to the European Parliament that we co-wrote all together. I mean, there was a basic document which was elaborated during the discussion on a joint response of the European Union for the coronavirus crisis. We decided to use an official petition to the European Parliament for two reasons. The first one was because it's kind of the mission of what we do as an organization, as humans, but also in the whole concept of participatory democracy. So using the instruments, going all in institutionally wise as much as possible, and making sure that the bridge between citizens and institution is built so that there can be an injection from citizens that can help the institution to be the better version of themselves somehow. So this petition was submitted through the official portal of the European Commission, and we then attached to that a subscription of informal endorsement, because there is not such a way until a petition is not formalized in the portal to gather support. Over 70,000 citizens subscribed the petition from across all Europe, and this is another important element of participatory instruments at an European level. The fact that it can foster the European citizenship as it should be, as it could be, or as it is, and can create a pan-European space for political debate and political action. So this is one of the achievements of the petition. And in a second, we will go into the merit of that. The second element is that we pushed, thanks to this support, for the activate and the dialogue with MEPs. A few MEPs supported that. It was possible to activate an urgency procedure for the petition. So it was written an open letter to President Sassoli, the European Parliament that we've been in touch with within the Petty Commission, led by Eleonora Evi, activated the urgency procedure, and this has created something very important. So on the 30th of April, so next week, us as myself, representing the people that created the petition, will present the petition to the European Parliament. But I will not be the only one, and we have Jonathan, who is going to speak about after me, who is a single citizen, because the petition to the European Parliament can be submitted also by one single citizen. So some of the petitions submitted with regards to the coronavirus crisis are be heard in a special session of the Petition Committee of the European Parliament. And in a moment where there is a high contraction of rights in general due to the state of emergency, a risk for the rule of law, but a risk also for the exercise of these political rights, the fact that the European Parliament is opening its doors, or digital doors, to citizens through a process that it's always been there, it's not been invented for the purpose of the coronavirus crisis, it's an important sign that the bridge between participatory democracy and representative democracy should be fostered with stronger foundation, the stronger foundation we can have, because this is what can really make change happen. I will give the word 1 second for 3 minutes to Lorenzo Mineo, who was the editor, coordinator of the petition. Is gonna tell us a bit, to be on the same page, what was the content of the petition, and also a work that we are doing, and I'm gonna share the link in a second, is now to prepare for the 30th of April, so to see between the proposal that was submitted and what was done by the Commission and the Parliament, or promised by the Commission and the Parliament, or in progress, where is the gap and where we can try to push for more. So Lorenzo Mineo for 4 minutes to go through the element of the petition, then back to me, and then to Jonathan.
Yeah, maybe I will be also quicker. I won't bore you with a detailed description of the gap between the proposal you can do it, or the petition that was somehow the output of the last participatory democracy meeting, and the measures already taken and the proposals of the European Commission to address this crisis. First of all, thanks to Samuele Nannoni for listing and summarizing some of the most relevant action taken by the commissions. We have to say that a common stockpile that was one of our stockpile of medical equipment, of course, was one of our requests in the EU Can Do It petition, has been already strengthened during this month by the European Commission. Apart from that, also some funding to international funds for the recovery has been done. For example, the EU is contributing to 20 million to the coalition of epidemic preparedness. Of course, this funding is still not very consistent, but there is also a 28 million funding for the research on coronavirus, in particular in low income countries in sub-Saharan Africa. There is also, and this is maybe the most relevant point, the will of the European Commission to withdraw the European budget, the multi-annual financial framework, to help government in this crisis. And there is also the will to accelerate the Green New Deal and to make the enormous public money investments that we will have in this phase also an occasion to convert in a sustainable model the European economy. Of course, some of the most structural reforms that we were suggesting in our petition, such as the reform of the competence on European civic protection and healthcare, this is not still addressed by the proposals of the Commission. Of course, we all know that the discussion on Eurobond is still far away from what we requested in our petition. And most important, I think the most important lack in the Commission proposal, which is not still published, but we have a speech published on the website, a speech of Ursula von der Leyen summarizing some of the main proposal that will be taken. I think one thing that is missing is the contribution to WHO by the European Commission, exactly in the moment when Donald Trump is cutting funds to this institution. The Commission is still not giving relevant funding to this institution. So this was just a summary of the main things missing in the European Commission will. Of course, we will deepen maybe also after this meeting some other aspect to see which kind of proposal could be useful to trigger the commission action. And yeah, that's just I wanted just to show that these meetings are somehow constructive, and our will is also to produce an output to demonstrate that there can be a civic proposal to the commission action in this moment.
Thank you, Lorenzo Mineo. We are going to close in around 10 minutes this first round. Before passing the word to Jonathan, I would like to share with you another thing that we are doing with the promoters of the petition. We thought how we can make sure that the petition is presented as something that is not only one citizen, but is representative of more people. And so how we can bring the citizens to the European Parliament. Probably in normal times, we would have organized a sort of walk-in or something like that. So this is not possible. So the creativity of some activists created the project that I'm going to share with you in a second. It's called Face Petition. And I'm going to share my screen so that you can all see it, and also probably helping us to populate. So the idea is that I will be in a conference call like this with the MEPs. And we are gonna display Face Petition, which is basically pictures of citizens who supported the initiative adopting a word of the petition. So the idea is that I will share the link later on if you want to take part in this. You can go on the website, choose and pick and choose a word that is the text of the petition submitted to the Parliament, and send us a picture of yourself holding a card with that specific word. So the whole idea is that the issue of coronavirus can't be tackled by one person, not even by one institution. And as citizens, we are trying to bring our proposal all together there. It's a system developed by activists with their own skills and resources. So for me, it's highly emotional to share it here. And I'm going to put it here in the links so that you can help us to build this mosaic before the 30th of April. I'm going to close my screen sharing. The last, but definitely not the least person to speak in the introduction is Jonathan Beadle. I don't know if I pronounced correctly your surname. The story of Jonathan is quite interesting, and I will let him tell his story. We were reaching out to other promoters of petitions to be together on the 30th of April. And Jonathan is a single one-man band who submitted his own petition on nothing less than the management of the migrant crisis in the Aegean in Greece. So I asked Jonathan to explain us in no more than 5 minutes, if you can, why you did it as a story, but also why you chose an instrument of participatory. I mean, you could have launched an appeal on change.org, whilst you choose to talk to the European Parliament. And I think as a single citizen, it's important to hear why you made this decision and what was your drive for doing that. And thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It's great that you're all speaking English. Thank you for that. Why did I write the petition to the EU? Because I was angry and I felt that there wasn't a lot being done, and it was on a whim. It was just a spontaneous thing. I looked at the EU and thought, well, what can I do? And I found the petition and I sent one in, and lo and behold, I got a reply and it's accepted. I have no idea what happens next, or what to do, or how to get people to sign it. I didn't follow it through very much. But just a bit of background to it is, obviously I'm English, I'm British, I'm a European. I'm appalled and disturbed by our Brexit. I hate it, and worried about the rise of nationalism and authoritarianism. And now I'm even more disturbed by the European Union's lack of a coherent and collaborative response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Just when we need unity and solidarity, EU countries are retreating into their own shells. I was inspired to write my petition, having been closely connected to the situation on Lesbos in the Aegean Islands in Greece in particular, as my son worked in the Moria refugee camp for 5 months. It's the largest refugee camp in Europe. And he was deeply affected by what he saw and what he had to deal with. The experience caused him some sadness and a lot of anger too, and left him with a profound sense of the inherent unfairness of the situation and frustration at the inadequate response from local authorities, from larger authorities, Greek, EU, or international. It also gave him a great sense of purpose, helping desperate people and recognizing our shared humanity. He had to hold on tight to the feeling that however small his contribution, simply giving a blanket or a pair of shoes to a child or fixing a family's tent was at least something. I felt through talking with him the suffering was immense and totally unnecessary, and the thought of COVID-19 spreading unchecked in those conditions was appalling. And this, added to the appearance that the EU was doing very little, and the intransigent and uncaring attitude of my government in particular, made me angry and annoyed with the European Union's deals with Greece and Turkey. The situation on Lesbos in Greece is a microcosm of Europe's future. If we don't learn to deal with it, we will fail. Where I wished for concrete action and humanity, compassion and care, all I could see was impotence and inertia or plain indifference. Nations across the EU are building hospital facilities in record time, housing the homeless, looking after COVID-19 patients, and springing to action in this emergency. Where is the political will to do the same for the Aegean Islands overwhelmed with refugees? Where is the love? And I'd like to just quote Martin Luther King, and if a tear comes to my eyes, I don't apologize. Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. So that was my motivation for writing a petition. And even if the petition gets nowhere, at least it's connected me to this community, for which I'm very grateful.
Thank you, Jonathan, and I'm unapologetically crying as well, so we are two, and thank you very much. Now, thanks for your contribution, because it really also helped us to go to the first proper panel discussion, which is going to be very open, apart for our keynote speaker, Bruno Kaufmann, that I'm going to introduce in a second. Because what happened with Jonathan is that he felt the urgency, he submitted the petition, but if it wasn't for us triggering the process, the urgency, we would never heard about his proposal. I didn't have the time to read it. I didn't read it through because it's not yet published on the website of the European Commission. But imagine a Europe where really a citizen can submit the petition. It can go to all other European citizens. They can be informed about that. And potentially a citizen could trigger that critical mass that we are looking for example, with expertise, NGOs that maybe have more, for sure, with all respect for Jonathan, might have more competencies and maybe years of work on the issue of migrants, and how this could really create that space of political European actions and dialogue between citizens, civil society, organized and unorganized, and institutions. So thanks, Jonathan, for sharing your story. I hope you're going to stay with us for the entire council if you can. And let's open now the panel, which is titled, which is not a panel, it's more a conversation among us. It's titled "Knowledge is Power." So from now until 4, I ask all of us to try and think about participatory democracy with the lenses of information. Information on two sides, and Bruno Kaufmann are going to help us on this. One lens is the information that needs to be provided by the institution about what's happening in the space of participatory democracy instruments. And the other pair of lenses is about the media. What, for example, public broadcasters, without even going too specifically, should do to guarantee, so these two elements should do to guarantee citizens the full awareness of their rights to kick off and trigger participatory democracy processes, or to take part in those processes that are triggered by someone else. One example, European citizen initiatives. Marco mentioned stopglobalwarming.eu, which is dear to my heart because it's promoted by humans, but not only. But all of us probably had experience with European citizen initiatives, national referendum, or things like that. What a difference makes when citizens know that they can sign something, know that they can take part in that. It's the difference between achieving a certain level of public debate or not. So we have today with us Bruno Kaufmann, is the global democracy correspondent of the Swiss Broadcasting, and is gonna walk us for the next 10, 12 minutes through the Swiss model. The Swiss model is particularly interesting because we talk about a federation, because we talk about a state where participatory deliberative democracy and direct democracy are essential foundation of the democratic debate. And I thought that inviting him could have been a great way to kick off half an hour session on how we can imagine and envision a more informed process of participatory democracy in the EU. After him, in the meantime, if you want to talk on this topic, you can write your name in the chat so we can calculate how much time we do have before the next panel, which is at 4. So welcome, Bruno Kaufmann. I'm gonna share I'm gonna give you the ability to share your screen so that you can walk us through your slides. If I find you, 1 second. It's of course not alphabetical order. Okay, make presenter. Okay, Bruno Kaufmann, Global Democracy Correspondent with Broadcasting. Welcome.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Can you, let's see, I have to open allow you to do that here. Okay.
We can't see the screen yet. Let me see if I'm doing something wrong. Okay, you should have a screen share button on the same panel where you had the chat.
Okay.
And the microphone. You should have the microphone, the webcam, and a screen share option.
Let's see. Okay. Here and here. It's not the screen doesn't show me. You need to call me an organizer or moderator to be able to do that, it says.
Sorry?
On my screen, it says that I can only share if you are assigning me to be a organizer or moderator as well.
I did. Let me see if I can help you somehow. You should receive another message from me. Sorry, everyone, but you can't do the test for this before. I'm sorry. Okay, it seems not working. Maybe Bruno, if you send me your slides, I can share it on my screen, and in the meantime, maybe you can start to talk and we catch up.
Okay. It will take.
Or maybe you know what you can. Yeah. Okay. I'll do like that.
Mm-hmm.
Or yeah.
Okay. It's now. So. I'm sorry, it seems to be a new wave of security things. Every time you want to do something, you have to confirm and
I'm sorry, because in theory I see you as the presenter, so I don't know why you don't see the option.
Just one moment. Okay, now the transfer is going to you. Okay, I'm sorry for that. So hello everybody, I'm happy to be with you this afternoon. I'm talking to you from Sweden, where I'm based and living in a small city outside Stockholm. And of course, the Corona crisis is also very much a crisis for the country here, even if the schools and the shops and normal life is not like locked down like in other places. Most people keep distance, most people work from home, and the whole discussion about democracy and participation has been very direct to me here in my home place, where there has been a citizen initiative about the new school, and the local government postponed it now. The referendum would have taken place very in the middle of the crisis, in the end of March, but now the local government wants to postpone, doesn't want to hold the referendum anymore. So we had to work very hardly to make them changing this idea. And we can experience in many places around the world that executive powers at this time of the crisis try to use this time to go beyond their competencies and to undermine the influence of people and political parties and parliament. So it's a very universal crisis, but also, of course, a big chance for all of us to be reflective, to have these kind of exchanges. And in fact, all over the world now, people are gathering online to discuss and to reflect. And I think it's also a big chance for democracy and participatory democracy to be stronger after this time. So I hope did you, Virginia, got the presentation?
Yeah,
it's through WeTransfer.
I'm downloading it. Yeah,
Yes.
I got it. I'm in the process of opening it. Give me just 3 seconds. And
yes. And what I would like to share with you is basically, as Virginia said, some experience from Switzerland and other countries. For me as a journalist, I have worked for more than 30 years as a journalist for the Swiss Broadcasting Company, which is the public broadcaster, and which has of course a role to play in democracy and in participatory democracy. And in that way, it's very important to discuss how the media, how the information is working around that. So I think that will be now some of the slides coming up.
Yes.
And,
sorry, it's all.
I'm not sure. Will I be able to control them, or?
I'm afraid you need to tell me, because otherwise we spend other 10 minutes to understand how it works. But be patient. Apologies, everyone. It's when everything goes not exactly as planned.
So yes, as I said, I've been a journalist, but also a democracy supporter in many ways, as I have been an activist for citizen initiatives when I was very young in Switzerland. For instance, one of the initiatives I was involved in was an initiative, a citizen initiative to abolish the Swiss Army in the 1980s, where we were able to really change the political conversations with this tool, and also experiencing the feeling of losing a vote but winning the debate. So looking forward for Virginia to have the slides on, and then we.
Yeah, Virginia is working on it. 1 second. 1 second. We're almost there. If I can find the button. Sorry, I did so many times these meetings, and I don't know why it's today that. Okay, here we are. Inshallah.
Okay. So you can go to the next, and I mean, I was given this this title: Knowledge is Power: Participatory Democracy Instruments and the Role of the Media. The Swiss case, please next. And next, I'm based in Sweden. As I said, I'm a citizen of Switzerland and Sweden, and I'm basically a voter, a very active voter in both countries, and also have been elected to local governments. In a way, trying to use these two perspectives also to be part very much of the European level, being one of the promoters of the European Citizen Initiative since the 1990s, and also trying to use my journalistic work for that. It seems still to be a challenge. So please next. Next. So yeah. So both the Swedish radio and the Swiss Broadcasting Company are two public broadcasters which are financed through fees, which means that every household has to pay every year a certain fee for it. And on the other side, they are independent from political influence. And also through the Swiss Democracy Foundation, which is a support organization for democratic promotion and infrastructure. I've been very much involved in that. Please next. And next. Now I'm the global democracy correspondent of Swissinfo, which is the international service of the Swiss Broadcasting Company. It's an international service in 10 languages. We are publishing it in many languages, from English to Russian, Japanese, Chinese. And also this is having a focus on exactly democracy and participatory democracy. And as you can see, the slides are jumping around, but go to the next, please. Now talking about Switzerland is, of course, in a way a little bit a very small thing in one way, because Switzerland is such a small country, just 40,000 square kilometers in the middle of Europe. Please next. I
apologize. I don't know what is happening. Sorry, but I don't know why they jump. I apologize with everyone.
The stability of the presentation.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can just go like that. Next, please. Yeah. Here you see Switzerland is a country not based on ethnical, let's say, a basis or language, but the country which is neighboring both Germany, Austria, Liechtenstein, Italy, and France, and also having all these languages within. Please next. Switzerland is a federal country which is basically based on 26 different states, which are all sovereign and have all their own constitution, all their own legislation, all their own health system and education system. So in a way, it's a small, very much of a small European Union. Please next. And here you can see the division between the different language regions. The red one is the German one, then you have the blue one is the French one, and the green one the Italian one, and also the Rhaeto-Roman one. And of course, the public sphere and information and media is very much also based on this diversity of languages. To have a national conversation needs to include all these language groups, and in that way also information for all these language groups. And all the 4 languages are equal by law. That means everything needs to be translated into these 4 languages on an equal basis. Again, it's very similar to the European Union. Next. Then as a very key aspect of the political life, you have the 2,202 municipalities, which are all, again, in a way, autonomous and sovereign by that they can have their own local constitution. They have a lot of powers. About 65% of all tax money is handled by the local level in Switzerland. So the most tax money, most revenues are dealt with on the local level, and that has an important aspect also for democracy. Please next. So the way to modern participatory and direct democracy is a very interesting history because, please next, because this hasn't been like invented by Switzerland, but through influences from abroad, especially the American and the French Revolution, and of course many philosophers from other countries who at the time of when Switzerland was growing into a modern democracy were living in countries with dictatorships, so many of them were refugees to Switzerland. And today you can say Switzerland is much more than a representative government. It's basically a representative democracy based on federalism and direct democracy. Next. That means that the political system is insofar a developed democracy as it combines the key principles of a representative democracy. Next, please. Which are the rule of law, the protection of everybody's right, the separation of powers between different entities of the government, the delegation of powers through representatives and elections, and also direct participation through initiatives and referendums and petitions. Please next. So, having said that, I have to say it again, Switzerland did not invent federalism and direct democracy. It was very much influenced by other countries. Next, please. In fact, Switzerland was invented by federalism and direct democracy. That means that it was a national referendum which created Switzerland in 1848, before Switzerland wasn't existing as a state. Next, please. You can say the most important factors were on one side the American Constitution, which on its own side have its backgrounds in the Indian federalism between different native, like the Iroquois Federation. So the idea that different entities can live side by side together in a common federation. And on the other side, Mr. Condorcet from the French Revolution with the idea of modern direct democracy, like initiatives and referendums. Next, please. So this was the 1848 Constitution, which established this. Next. The federalism part is very important, as I said, that you have the closest, the municipal level and the state level is the most powerful levels. For instance, when you want to become a Swiss citizen, it's the municipality who makes the decision about that, not the national entity. So you can only become a Swiss citizen by first becoming a citizen of a municipality or a city. Next. The federalism today is based on this one confederation, 26 different states and 2,222 municipalities. Next. That's for the legislation, but please go further. Participatory and direct democracy plays a very important role. As I said, Switzerland has not one language, one religion, or one cultural entity. It's really through the conversation, through the dialogue, that the country becomes an entity, which means that without participation and direct democracy, Switzerland couldn't be a country like it is today. Next. Direct democracy and participation was developed step by step during different phases, always like a consequence of a crisis. In fact, it's very interesting that the first referendum law in Switzerland was introduced after an epidemic in the 1860s, where the government didn't deal with it in the proper way, so people required more rights to be involved. That means that the initiative in the referendum law, in fact, was the result of a situation, a similar one to today on the global level, but at that time only on the national level. Next. The different instruments of direct democracy are, on one side, the initiative to propose new amendments to the constitution, which is in fact basically an agenda setting right. Of course, you have in the end a national referendum on it, but it's basically about putting issues on the ballot, while the popular referendum is a checking tool that all legislation discussed and adopted in parliament can be put to the people. And in fact, you can say direct democracy works best in its indirect way, because the parliamentarians and the government knows if they don't do a good job, if they don't write clear laws, it will be put to a referendum. So they try to avoid this by being very clear, very open, very transparent and responsive. And 98% of all laws are never going to a referendum. And in this way, you can say direct democracy makes representative democracy much more representative. Please, next. And next. What is important also to see that it's not like a ad hoc thing in a way that, you know, sometimes when you have good luck, you can maybe vote once upon a time on an issue. You know that 4 times a year, all the issues which are ready for the vote are there. And here you can see the calendar for the next 20 years, that the next 20 years, 4 times a year, there's a national voting day, which means that you as a citizen are allowed to make decisions. I myself, in my life, I have participated in more than 1,000 national referendums and elections. And I must say I lost most of them, but I still think it's a very good system. Next. So the Swiss case of direct democracy offers great opportunities, but also interesting, challenging and promising prospects. Next. What I would like to go into now is the information and media part of it, because there are, of course, other parts like education, like finance, like voting rights, and all this is also very important. But let's go into the information and media part now. Please, next. What you can see here is the official media part, the official booklet called the voter pamphlet, which is sent about 2 months before a vote to every citizen and in its own language. And in this voter pamphlet, it's very clearly declared what the issues are, what the legislation is you are voting about. So you don't just vote generally about leaving EU or accessing EU, you're always voting about a legal text, and also the arguments in favor and the arguments against. So if you have managed to put the citizen initiative to the ballot, you have exactly the same space in this booklet like the government and the political parties do have. And this booklet is in fact the most important single piece of information. About 70% of the Swiss voters say this is the most important source for their decision making. Next. Also very important is the public financed media, which means there are local radio stations, TV stations in the different regions for the different languages, but also national TV and radio stations. And they are financed by a household fee. Every household have to pay about 400 euro a year to make this possible. Next. This is not an uncontested concept. In fact, about 5 years ago, there was a citizen initiative which wanted to abolish the public broadcasting fee. It was an initiative by right-wing groups who said this is like state, we have to finance state TV through that. and they make an initiative, and we had a national vote 2 years ago about it. And it was a very interesting debate about the role of media in politics and democracy. And we got 71% of the people said we want to keep this household fee, we want to keep this public broadcasting. Next. On the other side, you have, of course, also a lot of private media. Newspapers is the traditional way because of the 26 states and the 2,222 municipalities. You have a lot of decision making going on all the levels, and this creates also the infrastructure for a lot of local newspapers and newspapers who have to inform. Next. At the same time, of course, private media have developed a lot on the internet, specific offers giving to young people, for instance, like the tool Easy Vote on an app, but also a lot of, let's say, interaction between citizens. Normally in Switzerland, we have before a voting day, you are inviting your friends to have a so-called referendum dinner to discuss the different issues, to go through the booklet and the information. But nowadays, of course, you have to do it in Zoom. But I can also say from my experience as a journalist, both for private media and for public media, it's very interesting that you mirror the decision making on the national level and on the city level also among the journalists. That means, for instance, when I worked for a big newspaper in Zurich, we had always, before the vote, about 2-3 months before the vote, we had this discussion among the journalists about what we think about this. And then we had a vote, internal vote, and the yes and the no side, they could both write then an article why they are in favor or against. On the public media side, of course, you cannot do this because you cannot recommend to say yes or no, but you have a lot of rules or a lot of regulations how to make it as balanced as possible. So public broadcasters are very important for the infrastructure of keeping such a continuous voting procedure and participatory system in a way that people are really informed. And we see ourselves also as part of this infrastructure for making participatory democracy possible. Next. On the other side, of course, it's also important to have the basic information about which tools are available. When I was a city government person, deputy mayor in my city in Sweden, I was responsible for democratic information and, of course, also democratic education. And we developed something called the Democracy Passport, which is a small booklet for people getting home, informing about all their rights. And we developed that also on the European level together with the Economic and Social Committee, which now have this European passport for active citizenship. And in fact, now there will be a new edition being published this summer, updating all the tools available through the ECI and other tools. And I think that's the main problem, that you also need to know which tools you already have, because very often people are complaining that they have nothing to say, but they're not even conscious about what and how they can be influential. Next, please. This work has also been extended to a global level through the Swiss Democracy Foundation and also the Swiss Info Information through the broadcasting. So we are basically supporting a civil society, democracy activists and governments around the world to be better in informing others, because as a Swiss, we understand how important it is to have this kind of fundamental and broad information. Next, please. We are in this time of Corona crisis, and all over the world there is a lot of discussion about how can we use this time to improve democracy. And at Democracy International, which is also part of our network, we have established a democracy community website where all different kind of experiences are monitored and also are mapped. So on this map, you can contribute, you can also give information, you can take out information, what's going on around the world when it comes to democracy and the coronavirus. Next, please. We have also developed an online library on participatory and direct democracy through the Initiative and Referendum Institute website, So there you can also get a lot of tools, all these passports, all the reference literature available. Next, please. And finally, I can give you the real warm welcome to the next Global Forum on Modern Direct Democracy, which will take place next year. We had to move it from this year to next year because of the virus, which will happen next year in April 28 to May 1st. It's the biggest world conference on participatory and direct democracy. Last year, we had this conference in Taichung, before in Rome, Italy, and after the forum in Bern, it will be in Mexico in 2022. Please, next. So my key takeaways for this introduction is that we, on one side, have to be very conscious about the toolbox available for our rights. Which kind of tools do we really have already? How can we use them? And also be very conscious about in which way is the media part of the infrastructure for this participatory toolbox, or in which way maybe the media is more of a hinder for it. And we need to see them separate on one side, because we cannot wait for a toolbox to get the good media or the good media to get the toolbox, but also to develop them, of course, each as such. At the same time, we also have to see how they are interacting together, because media and democracy and participation are all together in it. Next. So thank you very much for your attention. And here are some of the links I named, and I look forward also if you have any comments or discussion points. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruno, and apologies for the jumping of the slides, but we made it through incredibly. So we have 10 minutes before the next panel. Let's see if there are questions for you in the chat, and then I have a couple of additions. So we have a question from Luca Raitieri, who is asking, in Switzerland, the federalism and direct democracy are very important against coronavirus. There is an additional comment from Luca. In Europe, it's very difficult for all states to collaborate together against coronavirus. Perhaps because Europe isn't a very federalist system like Switzerland. I don't know if you want to give a 1-minute answer on this, Bruno, on the relationship between federalism and democracy.
I mean, it's really an interesting time for this kind of collaboration and people working together. I mean, we see, for instance, that many of our classical tools of collaboration are based on having people meeting each other and to have informal talks on the side of the, for instance, EU Council summits. So a lot of the things have been established based on the opportunity to meet in person. And now when we cannot do that anymore, many things becomes much more clearer when it comes to their weak and their strong points. And this is also true for, of course, for the collaboration between countries or different parts of a country. And I think it's very important that we use this time now to be very attentive, to really observe, not to rush too quickly to conclusions about what's working, what's not working, and not to be impatient about what we want to achieve, because we can also see certain people now really want to use this crisis to say, what have we said all the time? It's exactly now happening. We have to be a little bit patient, but at the same time, not being, of course, inactive. We can really use this time now to be very looking into how does our democracies work in time of crisis, and what do we need to improve. And for me, it's clear that we can see that the poorly nationalistic approach to it is maybe attractive when it comes to communication, and it's also this kind of inner solidarity, but at the same time it's very unhelpful to solve a problem which is truly global and truly transnational. So what we can see now is that we need to also, when it comes to solution making or finding solutions, we have to become much closer to local entities. Cities, mayors are playing an important role. So I can see that democracy in the future will become much more localized again. At the same time, we can also see that it becomes much more digitalized, because many countries now do understand why we need to digitize democracy and participation, also parliament, so we can work in a proper way, even in times when we cannot move around and see each another. And finally, also, as it is clear, we need to make it more transnational. That means we need abilities to agree and to agenda set on the transnational level. And of course, the European Union for developing this is a very a proper and very useful context. So again, I would say that we can use this time now to be ready to have clear ideas and proposals how we can democratize democracy.
Thank you, Bruno. I don't know if there are any comments and questions. Just write down your name in the chat if you have it, because we have 5 minutes to try to not be too late on the next session. Bruno, everyone is appreciating you. I have a question myself, or two. So one question, which is, how does it work to the relationship between the institutions in charge of activating and maintaining the process and the educative element of the media? So how, for example, the public broadcasters, which are the guidelines that they have, or how you guarantee a debate that is across languages, and like how the public sphere is maintained by the media, and which processes are in place that can be somehow imagined at a European level. I'm thinking about a European public broadcaster, which is a proposal that's been on the table for quite a while in the federalist approach, or other ways how national broadcaster can be strengthened, if not obliged, to cover participatory democracy instruments with the right level of attention and awareness. I make an example. I think it's been an experience for a lot of us. If you talk about European citizen initiatives with national journalists, most likely they don't even know. So how does it work, the relationship between the tools and the media?
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that you need a division of duties, division of powers, separation of powers, even in this field. I mean, I have seen in recent years that there has been a tendency, again, for autocratization, which means that countries or governments want to get back control over the public broadcasting system, because it's, of course, very powerful, and to undermine the independence of a public broadcasting system. And this is not very helpful because, of course, in the end, people get very mistrustful to this. They don't believe it because they think it's just what the national government want to say. We see that, for instance, in Hungary very clearly today, where independent journalists are basically not existing anymore because they are not allowed, and they are threatened by being put to prison if they produce so-called fake news, which are criticizing the national government. So we have to be very cautious about this. Where we have these kind of achievements of separation, we have to protect them, and where we don't have them, we have to work for them, because everybody, every institution, every person has its own specific role also in this infrastructure for democracy. As citizens, we are all citizens. Of course, we have to be very much involved in giving life to the democratic system. Nobody can guarantee a good democratic system institution-wise or political-wise. The people themselves have to be very active, and if we are not active, of course, we cannot blame anybody else to just follow its own interest. But at the same time, if there is no infrastructure for being allowed and supported in being active, it's very hard. So my vision is that as we have infrastructures, political infrastructures for governments and parliaments and political parties, we need also a political infrastructure for everybody, for every citizen. We need to invest much more into the democratic infrastructure than we invest into, for instance, certain elements of let's say, protecting it. Of course, we need to protect the democratic system, and we see just in this crisis that many countries are not protected very well when it comes to health and hospitals and all that. But at the same time, if we are not able to really involve different interests to make and give the people a voice on a daily basis, not just in election times, we are very weak when it comes to the crisis. So my hope is really that this time now, this challenging time in Europe and the world, gives us this mirror where we see these critical points and where we're able to come up with fixing it in a proper way.
Thank you, Bruno. Before going to the next panel, I want to pick up on the last point that you raised, and we are gonna, if you agree, upload your slides into the shared folder for the second meeting of the Council on Participatory Democracy. And within that, I'm gonna share the link in a second. There is a draft that particularly Simona Bonfante from Humans worked on, which is a draft proposal for direct mailing based on the Swiss model to European citizens in relation to European citizen initiatives. Bruno mentioned this passport that was created by the European Economic and Social Committee. So maybe this is something that we could integrate into the proposal. The whole idea, and I share it for all the participants, unfortunately we don't have time for debating it, is to make this a petition to the European Parliament, again, to start and trigger a debate on how it can be guaranteed a stronger and equal dignity to participatory democracy instruments compared to what is provided to representative democracy. So the whole idea is that, for example, for the last EU elections, 36 million were invested into campaigning to bring in people to vote on the elections, which is super important. But what if similar budget can be allocated to provide the granularity of information that Bruno described, so that it becomes part of the public debate at a European level or at a national level on participatory democracy. I'm going to share the draft in the chat here, so that if the participants in the council wants to have a look at it, and maybe you can even write down your names if it's something that you think we could work in a group of people. And thank you, Bruno. I don't know if you want to stay for the next session, but in the meantime, thank you very much for your thorough overview. And
thank you very much, and all the best to everybody.
Thank you. So next one, I leave the floor now to Michele Fiorillo, who is going to walk us through the world of technology and design of deliberative processes with amazing panelists. So I will shut up now and listen, and I will leave the floor to Michele Fiorillo from Civico Europe, who I hope can speak. Michele. Okay, it's not my lucky technology day, but I hope Michele can say something. Ah, okay, here he is. Michele, can you try and speak? Okay, his microphone doesn't work. Perfect. I can give you a phone number. Maybe you can log out and log in again. Maybe it can work. Okay, so whilst Michele does this, okay, Martin can go on. Okay, just to picture, Martin, I don't know, you want to start the panel, you know a bit how it's structured, so maybe Martin de Groot can start to talk about the ECI, and then Michele will join in. So the framework for this panel is technologies and processes for participatory democracy. Martin de Groot, the ECI campaign, kicks it off.
Thanks, Virginia. Thanks, Michele, who maybe you can still hear us. I hope you can hear me, just checking. I will try to stick to 5 minutes and put the timer. So my name is Maarten de Groot. At the moment, I'm a project manager in the Democracy and Participation in Europe project of the Bertelsmann Stiftung, which is an operating foundation in Germany. And previously, I also worked for the ECI campaign, as mentioned by Virginia, in particular on lobbying and campaigning for improvements in the regulation on the European Citizens Initiative when this revision of the regulation happened, which was in 2017 and 2018. And that capacity, I also worked a lot with Danila, who's here and who will speak, I think, after me, That's my background here. I want to talk to you briefly about 3 questions. What is the ECI and what makes it special? What is the ECI track record? And what explains the lack of a better track record? And thirdly, what is the promise of the ECI and how can it be realized, in particular in relation to the deliberative dimension that we are focusing on here? So first of all, what is the ECI and what makes it special? Well, as some of you know, it is the first worldwide, the first instrument for transnational, participatory, and digital democracy. When it comes to other digital agenda setting instruments in Europe, we have 3 other countries in which similar national agenda setting instruments exist. In Latvia in 2011, there was such an instrument introduced in 2012 in Finland and in 2018 in Denmark. So these are also digital instruments. But what makes the ECI, of course, even more special is that it's a transnational instrument that allows 1 million EU citizens from at least 7 countries to make a proposal to the European Commission to start the legislative process. So unlike, for example, the petitions is a very, it's not very formalized, basically, the petitions. So that leaves a lot of discretionary power to the European Parliament on how they want to deal with particular petitions. The ECI is way more regulated, unlike the petition instrument, which leads to a lot of bureaucratic burden on organizers. On the other hand, you have at least a minimal sense of security about what you can expect when you do manage to overcome all the hurdles to collect those 1 million signatures in 7 countries in 1 year. That at least you get a meeting with the Commission behind closed doors, that at least you get a public hearing in the European Parliament. As of recently, at least you will get a plenary debate in the European Parliament on your successful initiative. That's a new step for the ECI when it comes to the follow-up that Danila and I and many other people in civil society have fought hard for, basically, to convince the European Parliament to commit to organizing plenary debates on successful initiatives. So that's among the new things there. What is the ECI's track record? There have been 98 initiatives started. 72 of these have been registered by the Commission, so they were allowed to start collecting signatures. 5 of them so far have officially been recognized as successful, 4 of which have been already addressed by the European Commission. And there are at the moment 2 or 3 ECIs that have stopped collecting signatures, but that may still be successful. From the 4 ECIs that have been dealt with by the European Commission, 2 of them can be said to have had some limited EU-level policy impact. So all in all, that is still very limited. What explains this? I would argue, also in particular comparing, well, first of all, in comparative perspective, maybe it's still not that bad. There are the other agenda setting instruments that exist that are not binding. So they are all participatory instruments, not truly direct democracy instruments. They've also had limited direct policy impact at the national level. Nonetheless, I think we are still allowed to be critical. And I think one of the difficulty with the ECI is that it is an instrument that is focused and directed at the European Commission, which is not a directly elected institution. So if you compare this to Latvia and Finland, I think the relative success of those instruments is also because it's focused on a directly elected institution, and thus that should be by definition more responsive to citizens' demands. And thirdly, the third question, what is the promise of the ECI and how can it be realized? I believe the main promise of the ECI is to connect supranational democracy or supranational politics, EU-level politics, and national-level politics. I would not see the ECI as a strictly EU-level supranational instrument. I would see it as a transnational instrument that connects the 2 levels of governance. And how can it be realized? Well, first of all, by citizens acting together across borders. Secondly, I think a stronger involvement of both the European Parliament and national parliaments would go a long way towards realizing that potential. And thirdly, because I realized my time is, my own set time is almost gone, we can also think about connecting the ECI to a new deliberative instrument. In Oregon, or it's known from Oregon, there's the Citizens Initiative Review, which is connected to a direct democracy instrument, the popular initiative. So if you collect a certain amount of signatures, you can have a referendum that before the referendum takes place, a citizens panel of around 24 citizens is composed that outlines the pros and cons of that particular referendum question. And that panel is randomly selected and broadly representative of the population, or at least the diversity thereof. And we could also think of connecting such a citizens panel in a follow-up on successful initiatives, so as to be able to check whether the views of a significant minority of citizens, and that is 1 million people, is actually also reflected in the wider EU population. Let me finish here. Thanks.
Thank you, Martin. So
Thanks,
think,
Martin.
Okay, Michele, you take it from here. You also have a couple of questions in the chat. You decide how to use it. We can hear you.
Yes. Yeah, I think maybe Daniela can complete the illustration that Martin made about the ECI, maybe about also the improvement about the digital platform that ECI should use or could use.
I can go on and continue. Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Martin, for that introduction for the ECI, so I can cut that part out. Yeah, and Martin mentioned it, the European Citizens Initiative, we often say it's the first transnational tool of participatory democracy, but what's really missing there is that it's the first transnational tool of digital participatory democracy. And it's important, that digital part, because the fact is that almost 70% of signatures are collected online. So that means this is a digital tool. And of course, it makes sense that the ECI is a digital tool, because how else can you campaign across 28 countries from a pool of 500 million people to potentially get those 1 million signatures? You have to work digitally. And so that makes the digital dimension of the ECI that much more important, and it needs to be much stronger than it is now. There's been some improvements already. And yeah, I think it's really the biggest topic when it comes to the ECI is how can we improve this digital dimension. And some of the improvements, for example, is in the data that's required to sign an ECI. Before this year, there was a former regulation, former rules of the game of the ECI, where there was 6 different sets of data that was then chosen from member states that you would ask signatories. And that made it really hard for campaigners to campaign online, campaign offline, because they were not sure which member state was requiring which set of data. Now those are down to 2. It makes it much easier. The only difference between those 2 is whether one requires an online personal ID number or not. So it's much easier for campaigners to work. So we always, any step we take in the ECI, we want it to be much more user-friendly, always keeping in mind this digital aspect, because I think this is where the real potential of the ECI lies that has not been fully expanded yet. Yeah, some other cutbacks, unfortunately, to the digital dimension of the ECI is in the online collection system, and that's the form that's used online to collect the signatures. And before this regulation, there was the option you could choose. So until this year, you could choose whether you wanted to take the central online collection system. That's the online collection system that the Commission provides. It works totally fine. There's been initiatives that have used it, that have been successful with it. So it's not that there are major problems to it, but there has been you could have a second option to that, and that's the individual online collection system. And that's if a set of organizers are very tech savvy, they can set up their own online collection system, of course, following some certain guidelines. It needs to be approved by the Commission first, but they have more the ability to personalize it and to make it work around their campaign. That will no longer be allowed in this new regulation that was just went into effect beginning of this year. those individual online collection systems will be phased out by the end of 2022. So you can still use it right now. If you launch an ECI today, for example, you could use it, but starting from 2023, that will not be allowed anymore. This is, of course, a challenge, but it does, in a way, pose an opportunity because there's that much more pressure on the central online collection system that it needs to be working in tip-top position. It needs to be really learning from the great features of the individual online collection system. But it does present also the challenge that now the flexibility is not there. So that's something to keep in mind where as far as challenges and improvements are with the digital question. Another improvement and something that is fairly new in the ECI's 8 years of existence is that there's newly established ECI Forum, and that's the online collaborative platform of the ECI. And this is the way to connect online. So as the ECI is a digital tool, you're wondering how can you then connect online? Where is the community online of the ECI experts, the ECI organizers, the users, the signatories, and the ECI Forum is the platform for that. It's still only 2-3 years in existence, so it's constantly learning also, and it's still yeah, it still needs some improvement, but it offers some really great features. For example, you can get expert campaigning, legal, and fundraising advice through the ECI Forum. Any ECI organizer, whether you've already launched an ECI or not, probably better to consult these experts before you launch your ECI to get that advice. But you can go there and you can put all the information about your ECI and then the problems you have, for example, where it comes to your fundraising questions, and you will get tailor-made advice from an expert on that topic within 5 to 7 days. So that's a feature that works really well. That's done through the ECI Forum. The ECI Forum is also a good way to connect with other organizers. It's a good way to see and test whether a topic is popular, is already out there, is interesting enough. If there's already some support for it, you can post that on a discussion forum, and it really works like an actual forum. You post a thread about it, and then there's others can comment, and you can have a discussion. So it's a little bit the conversations. Many of you've maybe been to or heard of ECI Day, which takes place once a year in Brussels, hosted by the European Economic and Social Committee. And it's, we say, why is there just one day in person for the ECI? We all come from all corners of Europe for this ECI Day, but let's take those discussions also online the rest of the year and not just wait until that one day. So that's a little bit what we're trying to do with the ECI Forum to improvement. So yeah, to conclude, I mean, we already have improved some points of the digital dimension of the ECI. There's some things that are still posing as challenges for us, some things that we still have to learn. The ECI is still a fairly new tool, so there's still much more that we can learn even from other national examples. Yeah, and I think that there's just more room for improvement, and that's something that it will take the experts, for example, that are here on this call and others who just continually use it. The more we use it, then the more it will improve.
Thanks a lot, Daniela. Before, I think we didn't make the presentation. Daniela Lancic, she's from Democracy International, and also I would like to underline that Daniela, she's leading with other organizations also a campaign to extend the European Citizen Initiative model to a global level. We share this idea of a World Citizen Initiative, and maybe you can paste here the link, because I think will be interesting for everyone also to join this campaign, especially in this moment for the world. Martin de Groot, as he said, he's part of the European Citizen Initiative campaign, the campaign that initiated the idea of the European Citizen Initiative, and then was inserted in the Treaty of Lisbon, and now is campaigning for the improvement of this instrument. And Martin now is working the Bertelsmann Foundation, and is an expert on deliberative democracy. And I present also the other speaker. As fair for the question, we collect the questions for the end of this panel, because if I know we have many questions, but if we go with the question now, we risk not to close in time the session. So I thanks to be with us also Iago Bermejo Abati from Participalab, and Magali Plovy, President of the Brussels Francophone Parliament, and Jonathan Moscovici, that he's advisor in democratic innovation at the Parliament and former coordinator of G1000. I see among the faces also the Yves, who is also the coordinator of G1000 now, that made us in contact with Iago and many others. So just I wanted to say something about the title of this panel. Before we named this Tech for Democracy, then we were thinking that it was better to also insert this deliberative design, because technology, as we know, the word techne comes from ancient Greek as like the way to do things, the art to do things. So it's not just the technology as now for us, it's all the digital, the engineering, but really is like techne for democracy, maybe the art of democracy. So how to improve democracy through this new type of deliberative theory and practices. And we are here collecting some example of how we can do it. And of course, technology in the sense also of digital instrument can help this kind of experiments. Okay, and because we are talking about digital, how online can help offline, I think now it's time to give the floor to Iago, that in fact with had a great experience in Madrid, which is continuing, and is now also part of the Consul Foundation board. Consul, as maybe some of you know, it's an instrument for online deliberation connected also to physical assemblies, a bit like Decidim, this other platform developed in Barcelona en Comú, etc. But yes, please, Iago, take the floor.
Well, thank you for inviting me here. Everybody can hear me, I suppose? Yes? Yeah, okay, perfect. Yes, I'm going to explain a little bit the Madrid innovations around digital participation, and not only digital participation. So we were like trying to innovate around 3 components. One will be like collective intelligence of the digital networks. The other will be the direct democracy approach that we have here from these examples from Bruno in Switzerland, and also in European Union with the citizen initiative, and also the deliberative component of this kind of randomly selected samples of mini publics working to give a more representative approach to participation. Okay, so we have been in my lab, we have been working with this kind of 3 elements. And the first one has been, so I have been working in Media Lab Prado, which is a citizen lab in Madrid City Council. And we have been trying to innovate around what was going on at the same time in Madrid City government. So we were cooperating with the government participation area. And so they were also innovating at the same time. We were thinking about how to innovate about what they were doing. And it was a little bit crazy, but we had a lot of fun. So what we started to do in Madrid is to create a digital platform to allow everyone to make proposals in a very easy way. These proposals were collected in the platform, and on every proposal you could see debates, and everybody could share these kind of proposals, ideas. And these proposals could work in very different ways. So for example, they could work in the participatory budgeting processes. So if there are little proposals, we could say that local for the city, for imagine for a park, for a bike lane, they will go to the participatory budgeting process. And this is a not exactly a direct democracy process, but it's inspiring direct democracy. So it has a filter of technical from the city council who validate proposal based on technical details of the proposal, and then it goes to a final voting process. So a lot of these kind of proposals shared in the forum could finally be implemented in the city council by this process. On the other side, there was another kind of proposal, more similar to citizen initiatives, that were proposals who were allowed to get signed, to get support and validated support. So everyone giving a support has to give their, have to be validated as a user who has been, who is part of the city in Madrid. I mean, who is living, is registered in Madrid city. So every sign is one person, and this is connected with how petitions work informally in the digital medium, because usually, for example, if you see change.org, petitions are not connected with one person who has democratic rights in this kind of place. No, so in Madrid city we have this opportunity to validate users. So every proposal has a number of signs that are validated, and we can know that there are 1,000, for example, citizens supporting one proposal. So a proposal, just 2 proposals arrived to the threshold and were voted in a sort of referendum, also with digital voting at the same time, and they were validated by, it was like 8% of the total population of Madrid older than 16 years old. And the rest of proposals work a little bit like petitions. So there were a lot of proposals like arriving to 3,000, for example, support that they were just seen by the government, and okay, the government was doing some action, some kind of response to that kind of proposals. Okay, so this was the part that was done by the city council and the participation team where I was collaborating with them, and we were trying to innovate around that process. So this is a little bit crazy, but we find to do some kind of interesting innovations around this. So for example, we had thousands of proposals because it was so easy to propose that there were like this kind of cloud of 1,000 proposals, and most of them were not getting enough support to be implemented in participatory budgeting or in this kind of citizen initiative mechanism. So what we do is try to get some sense of all this kind of huge amount of data, and we start to analyze that data with matching. Well, it's not really machine learning, it's like natural language processing. So we can take all the text from all proposal and trying to search for similarities in all this kind of big data of proposal in the city. And after that, so we identified proposals that were about the same issue. For example, children and the city. So how to give like a friendly city for children. So it was like 300 proposals about that. So we make a call for all these people that were talking about this in the platform, and we make a call, and they came together one day. So from this kind of 300 people, like nearly 100 arrived to our lab, and we helped them to create a community, self-managed community. And this self-managed community has the purpose. I mean, they need to create a community to create really a citizen initiative that could work. So nice, well-informed proposal, and also with a communication team that have enough resources to promote the proposal and to get enough support to be implemented. So it was a pilot that it was very successful, and it was called the Right to Play proposal. So this proposal finally arrived to be studied by the Observatorio Latvia. That is the next innovation that we were proposing. So at the same time, we were concerned about how direct democracy could be hijacked by, for example, populist movements or even corporations with a lot of money, like is happening, for example, in California. If you have the money, you have the citizen initiative with a referendum, because you can make a lot of, you can give a lot of money to marketing, and finally you get signs. Okay, so what about if we create a different alternative way to validate proposals? So here comes the idea connected with, I think it was Martin, I don't remember, the Oregon City Panel Review. This is also an initiative that is being piloted in Switzerland, and it's about creating a deliberative panel of randomly selected participants that could be a filter between a referendum and citizen initiative. Okay, so this was the origin of the original idea for the creation of the Observatorio de la Ciudad. So finally, in Madrid City, we had the last year, because finally another government arrived and some of the things were taken out. But finally, what happened in Madrid City is the most supported proposal was studied by the panel review. And this panel review tried to get information about the proposal and try to decide if it's really an important issue for the city, and it could even have the power to send it directly to referendum. So it's an alternative way to legitimate citizen initiative that is not related directly just with signs and supports, that is very connected with media power and having resources and organized citizenship. So this was a little bit the second great innovation. And well, we have another things, but I think it's enough for today.
Muchas gracias, Iago. And now, I mean, we have not so much time. I will give the floor to Magali, and we are very honored to have you with us to present this experiment, institutional experiment you are doing in the Parliament of Brussels, the Francophone Parliament of Brussels, the deliberative committees as a form of mixed participation of citizens together with MPs, which I think is something very, very interesting for everyone. Virginia, if you can help because Magali would like to show some slides, and if you can allow the Bérangère Jouret to share the screen. I don't know if she's here. Or Lorenzo, I don't know who is taking the lead of this. Maybe Bérangère, you can try to share the slides already. Si,
Bonjour, oui, on va essayer de montrer les slides. Bonjour, je vais faire la présentation en français, mais les slides sont en anglais. J'espère que ça pourra convenir pour vous. C'est vrai que avec la situation actuelle, il y a énormément de boulot, donc j'ai pas eu trop le temps de préparer mon intervention en anglais, mais voilà, j'espère que ce sera clair pour vous. Sinon, on veillera à traduire un certain nombre d'éléments si ça peut aider. Et je suis aussi désolée parce que je suis en même temps en commission de santé au niveau bruxellois, et donc raison pour laquelle je suis pas venue, j'ai pas pu me connecter plus tôt. Mais je voulais quand même être parmi vous parce que je trouvais que c'était important de pouvoir vous présenter ce qu'on essaie de mettre en place dans depuis quelques mois, et il faudra encore quelques mois, pardon, pour mettre ça en place. Je ne sais pas si ça fonctionne pour le slide. Non. On n'arrive pas à partager les slides.
Bon, je sais pas parce que Virginia, elle n'est pas là.
Je ne pense pas que ça va être possible à ce moment.
Ok. Ah. Bon, et alors, Jonathan, tu veux traduire? Sinon, je peux le faire moi-même.
Sinon, Jonathan.
I can deal with it. Yeah.
Ok. Bon, on va sans les slides, quand sera possible, on va les montrer peut-être dans les slides.
Désolée. Ok. Donc, d'abord, il y avait une petite présentation de qui je suis, et surtout par rapport au fait que ce projet se met en place, c'est parce que j'ai travaillé pendant plusieurs années au niveau du parti écolo, donc de Green Party, pour sur les questions de démocratie et surtout de démocratie participative. Que j'ai travaillé aussi pendant plusieurs années sur la lutte contre la pauvreté. Donc j'ai évidemment une attention toute particulière par rapport à ces personnes. Là où je travaillais, il y avait vraiment un travail à partir de leur expérience, de leur voix, pour en faire des recommandations auprès du gouvernement, des gouvernements. Et puis en 2017, en juillet 2017, je suis devenue députée et à ce moment-là, j'ai déposé très vite un texte au niveau du Parlement bruxellois pour pouvoir mettre sur pied les commissions qu'on appelait à ce moment-là mixtes, mais donc qui est devenue délibérative. Et quand j'ai pris la présidence en 2019, la présidence du Parlement francophone bruxellois, c'était vraiment pour moi une de priorités, raison pour laquelle j'ai engagé une personne qui travaille à temps plein sur ces questions et qui m'aide vraiment à faire évoluer la démocratie au niveau de Bruxelles, et c'est Jonathan Moscovic, qui donc a été coordinateur du G1000. J'espère que ça va comme ça. On continue comme ça ou comment on fait? C'est bon? Ok.
Oui.
Alors,
Yes, I don't know if everyone is understand French or we need to translate.
sorry.
I think we need to translate. We need to translate. Jonathan, maybe you want to translate the first part or?
So Magali was explaining why it was important for her to implement this project, and that she has a background in democracy and innovation. She was in charge of democracy, the Green Party in the French-speaking Belgium. And so what we'll do now, because it's not easy without the presentation, we'll send you the PowerPoint presentation later. And for now on, she'll explain and I'll summarize what she said. Okay.
Ok, très bien. Je me demandais si on pouvait pas copier-coller le slide et vous le mettre dans le chat pour que vous puissiez suivre, parce que vraiment la plupart des choses, je pense avec les slides en anglais, vous pourriez suivre plus facilement. Mais donc, comme j'ai dit, j'ai déposé un texte alors en 2017 et il y a eu un avis du Conseil d'État. C'est un avis donc qui est obligatoire sur les textes légaux en Belgique pour analyser. Et il y avait un problème, c'est que on avait proposé le même pouvoir décisionnel pour les citoyens et pour les députés. Et ça, ce n'est pas possible en Belgique parce que la Constitution ne permet pas que les citoyens aient le même pouvoir décisionnel que les députés. Et donc, on a dû revoir le texte qu'on a redéposé, enfin, donc on a fait évoluer. Mais comme entre-temps, je suis devenue présidente donc de l'Assemblée ici et qu'on était en majorité, donc les partis Green Party étaient en majorité, on a pu vraiment faire avancer ces textes et donc d'avoir un accord, un vote en décembre de l'année passée, 2019, sur ce règlement et avec un accord, un appui aussi d'une grande partie des partis d'opposition et ceux qui n'ont pas voté pour, en tout cas, n'ont pas voté contre, ils se sont abstenus. Je ne sais pas, Jonathan?
I'll translate. It all started in 2017. So the Green Party introduced, Magali Plovi introduced a legislative proposal for mixed committees, but the Council of State rejected the proposal because at that time, citizens and member of parliament, they were on the same foot. So after the elections of 2019, where there was a new coalition put into place, there was a progressive coalition in Brussels, and the Green Party joined the government. And following that, in the government policy statement, they decided to mention the fact that they wanted to use citizen participation. And in December 2019, so a few months ago, the General Affairs Committee decided on the reform of the parliamentary. So, and the majority parties and some opposition parties, and we are now working on the operational aspects of the deliberative committees, and we are hoping that the first commission will be able to take place at the end of 2020.
Okay. Merci Jonathan. Depuis, je vois qu'on partage et que vous avez du coup maintenant les slides en anglais. Donc, je vous propose alors le slide suivant. Donc ici, ce qu'on essaie de montrer, c'est à partir d'un tableau de Sophie de Villers qui donne un certain nombre de critères, à partir d'un certain nombre de critères sur la démocratie représentative, délibérative et directe. où se trouvent, hein, vous voyez dans la dernière colonne, où se trouvent les commissions délibératives. Et donc, c'est vraiment, on rassemble en fait des citoyens et des députés, donc des gens élus. Donc, on est vraiment dans un mixte d'élections et de tirage au sort. Les citoyens ont un pouvoir d'avis, tandis que les députés ont un pouvoir décisionnel. Et donc là, c'était pas notre volonté au départ. C'est bien parce qu'on est limité par la Constitution belge. Donc il faut changer la Constitution pour permettre d'avoir le même pouvoir pour les citoyens que pour les députés. Et donc vous voyez que ce qui va en ressortir, ce sont des recommandations. Le slide suivant, les rangeurs. C'est donc les caractéristiques de cette commission délibérative. C'est donc un mixte entre ce qui s'est mis en place en Irlande et ce qui se met en place à Oost-België, donc en communauté germanophone de la Belgique. C'est vrai que c'est vraiment deux exemples qui nous ont beaucoup inspirés et pour lesquels on a vraiment pris beaucoup d'enseignements pour construire notre système. Ce qui est important aussi, c'est que ici, ce processus, il est intégré dans notre mode de fonctionnement et il est permanent. Donc, c'est bien notre règlement du Parlement qui a été changé et ce sont des commissions permanentes donc, qui vont pas se passer qu'une seule fois. C'est vraiment maintenant intégré dans notre mode de fonctionnement. Et donc, c'est vraiment un travail de rencontre des parlementaires par rapport aux citoyens. Il y a vraiment cette rencontre qui va pouvoir se faire dans le cadre du Parlement. Alors, la Commission, comme je vous disais, pas avec un même pouvoir pour les citoyens. Et si vous voyez dans la présentation, vous avez un astérisque à côté de Citizens. C'est parce qu'à chaque fois, on va vous montrer que ce déséquilibre, puisqu'il n'y a pas le même pouvoir décisionnel, on a essayé de le compenser par plus de transparence et de la motivation. Donc, vous verrez pendant la présentation, à un certain moment, il y a cet astérisque et c'est vraiment à ces moments-là qu'il y a ce déséquilibre qui se présente et pour la compenser, on a développé motivation et transparence. Et donc, pour faire le tirage au sort, il y a un certain nombre de critères de sélection qui sont déjà prévus dans notre règlement, mais on a un comité d'experts, je vous expliquerai par la suite, qui peut aussi déterminer ces critères, certains critères en plus de sélection. Alors, merci. Comment ça va marcher? Donc, 5 étapes. Une étape pour la sélection des suggestions, donc des thématiques. Une deuxième étape qui est la constitution de la commission délibérative avec le tirage au sort. Troisième partie, la délibération avec toute une séquence d'informations. Quatrième partie, les recommandations et les votes. Et enfin, la question du suivi. Donc, premier élément, la sélection donc des thématiques. Il y a deux possibilités pour pouvoir avoir une commission délibérative et donc les thématiques. C'est soit le Parlement lui-même décide que sur une thématique bien précise, on lance une commission délibérative, ou c'est à la demande de 1000 citoyens donc, qui vont signer pour faire une commission délibérative par rapport à une thématique. On permet, grâce à un site internet qu'on va mettre en place, il est en cours d'élaboration, on va permettre qu'à partir de 100 citoyens, on peut mettre cette suggestion sur le site internet pour que les personnes, les citoyens puissent ajouter leur signature pour arriver à ces 1000 citoyens. À ce moment-là, le Parlement est obligé de se positionner, soit il accepte la suggestion et on lance alors la commission délibérative, soit il refuse, mais alors il doit faire une motivation, il doit motiver. On espère qu'il y aura peu de refus et que ce sera plutôt des refus liés à éventuellement, on a besoin, il y a une étude qui est en cours par exemple, et on a besoin de la fin de cette étude, des résultats de cette étude pour pouvoir lancer la commission délibérative, ou qu'il y a trop de commissions délibératives en cours et qu'on ne sait pas toutes les faire en même temps. Deuxième partie, deuxième élément, la constitution des commissions délibératives. Donc là, on aura 3/4 de citoyens pour 1/4 de parlementaires. C'est vraiment suite à l'évaluation du processus qui s'est produit en Irlande, on a visé cet équilibre-là parce que eux-mêmes avaient moins de citoyens, je dirais, par rapport aux parlementaires, et il en est sorti qu'il valait mieux donner encore plus de place aux citoyens pour avoir un équilibre entre les deux. Donc, comment ça va se passer? Il va y avoir 2 tirages au sort. Un premier, donc on va envoyer sans critère aucun, donc envoyer à 10 000 personnes, par exemple, un courrier pour qu'ils puissent, en disant qu'ils ont été tirés au sort, c'est tous les résidents de Bruxelles, donc c'est pas des Belges, c'est les résidents à Bruxelles, à partir de 16 ans, qui ont des droits politiques, donc ça c'est important, les droits civils, et ça ne peut pas être des ministres, des parlementaires, etc. Sur base de ça, on va leur demander de réagir en donnant un certain nombre d'informations pour permettre de faire un deuxième tirage au sort s'ils le souhaitent, évidemment. C'est pas une obligation. C'est sur base volontaire. Et alors, sur base de ces critères, on va pouvoir essayer d'avoir une représentativité de Bruxelles et donc de faire ce deuxième tirage au sort, 45 personnes qui doivent être, on doit essayer qu'elles représentent le plus possible la population bruxelloise. Alors, quand la commission délibérative est constituée, on a alors plusieurs étapes. Une première, c'est la séquence de l'information. On doit essayer de donner le plus d'informations possible, mais sans noyer non plus les gens, évidemment. C'est le même niveau d'information pour tout le monde, tant pour les parlementaires que pour les citoyens. Et on va essayer aussi de développer des informations, pas uniquement au niveau écrit, mais aussi par des capsules, vidéos, etc. Il y aura aussi des experts qui pourront venir, il y aura des auditions pour pouvoir poser des questions, approfondir un certain nombre d'éléments pour que les 60 personnes, donc les 15 députés et les 45 citoyens tirés au sort, puissent après passer à la délibération, donc réfléchir et discuter sur base des mêmes informations. Donc cette délibération, elle se fera sur des tables de 8-10 personnes avec des facilitateurs, un accompagnement pour que tout le monde puisse prendre la parole, pour qu'il puisse avoir des échanges qui se passent dans de bonnes conditions. À la suite de ça, arrive alors des recommandations et il y aura des votes sur ces recommandations. Des votes qui ne sont pas les mêmes. Pour les citoyens, c'est un vote avec voix consultative et pour les parlementaires, c'est une voix décisionnelle. À nouveau, là, on a donc cette différence. Et donc ici, s'il y a une différence trop importante, une différence entre les votes des parlementaires et des citoyens, il faut que les parlementaires puissent expliquer cette différence, en tout cas leur vote, pour qu'on puisse justement avoir une plus grande transparence de ce qui se passe. Alors, l'étape suivante, c'est le suivi. Donc, lorsqu'on a voté les recommandations, il faut dans les 6 mois avoir un suivi qui est donné par les parlementaires qui peuvent soit faire un contrôle gouvernemental, soit par des textes de loi. Et on travaille actuellement avec le gouvernement pour voir comment eux aussi peuvent assurer ce suivi. Il y aura alors un comité d'accompagnement qui sera mis en place avec des experts de la participation et de la démocratie participative, des membres de l'administration du Parlement. Et par chaque commission, il y aura juste le temps de la commission des experts sur la thématique choisie. Et donc là, ce comité d'accompagnement est pour 2 ans, nous accompagne pendant 2 ans et va faire l'évaluation et des recommandations pour améliorer le processus. Je vais tout doucement terminer par quelque chose qui est vraiment fondamental pour nous. La population bruxelloise est très particulière parce qu'il y a quand même assez bien de pauvreté. Il y a une mixité en termes d'origine très importante et aussi une population assez jeune. Et donc, on veut que cette population puisse aussi participer. Or, on sait que souvent, ils n'ont pas accès, ils ne participent rarement à des processus de participation, de délibération. Et donc, on met en place un certain nombre de choses, d'accompagnement, de mesures pour qu'ils puissent justement plus facilement participer. Donc les jeunes, on va faire une lettre spéciale et on va faire un coaching spécial dès le début du processus. Pour les personnes qui vivent dans la pauvreté, là il y a vraiment un accompagnement pour qu'ils puissent être mis en confiance, pour qu'ils puissent mieux participer, qu'ils osent participer, et aussi par rapport à l'information pour qu'elle soit plus accessible et mieux comprise de leur part. Pour les personnes qui ont un handicap, de pouvoir en tout cas participer aussi. Donc là, il y a un accompagnement qui sera mis en place. Et pour les familles, de pouvoir mettre des activités spécifiques pour les enfants de 0 à 12 ans, pour que les familles puissent participer. Et donc, on voulait à la fin, le dernier slide, c'est pour montrer en fait que très vite, on voit qu'en fait, il y a un intérêt tant au niveau de la Belgique qu'au niveau international pour ce processus. On est en train de le mettre en place, donc il y a encore beaucoup de travail que l'on fait avec l'ensemble des groupes politiques. Tous les 15 jours, on se voit pour vraiment mettre ça en place. On espère qu'on arrivera dans les temps avant la fin de l'année. Et voilà. Si vous avez des questions, c'est avec plaisir que je pourrai vous y répondre ou que Jonathan pourra vous répondre.
Ok. Merci beaucoup, Magali, vraiment. We are running a bit out of time. I think, Virginia.
Yes, just thank you, everyone. And I welcome also the MEP Daniel Freund, who just joined us. Welcome. So we will have a bit of delay. So I'd suggest let's have the last 10 minutes for Michele to conclude with the speakers. And
yes.
Then we will do all the questions after the session on the citizen assemblies. At the end of the day, the two sessions are connected, so we don't run too late. And also, the MEP Gabriele Bishop is with us. So we do have, we are not alone in this participatory democracy moment. Great. So, Michele, to conclude, and then we open to the
thank you very much, Magali. It was very interesting. And I think that this kind of model could be something very interesting also for European institution, European Parliament in a way. And I take occasion because there is here Jonathan Moscovici that now is advisor to the Brussels Parliament together with Magali, but he was G1000 coordinator. And as Magali said, in a way, this is also a good example to show how self-organized experiment, grassroots experiment organized by the citizen can at some point become institutionalized, also collaboration with institutions. And also we will talk, I think, in the next panel with Lorenzo, all the distinguished speakers, how maybe that could be imagined also for this idea that many of us shared in the last years of an European Citizen Assembly, how we could start through the organization of these grassroots in order then to have this institutionalized. But maybe Jonathan and Yves, if you want to, in this 10 minutes, have a sort of short dialogue about this, we can move through you to the next panel. And for the questions, as said by Virginia, we will do all the questions at the end of the next panel. So please, Jonathan and Yves, take the floor.
Okay, I'll take the floor. You can support me if you want. So the idea is what Magali just introduced is based on the very first idea of the G1000. So I don't know if you remember, but in 2011 we had already quite a big political crisis in Belgium. We are still world champion in not having a federal government. So for 541 days we had no government, and people were getting quite frustrated at that time because they were watching the politicians dealing with an issue that at that time it was the decision of a jurisdictional district, and people were getting crazy. So that there were different initiatives, grassroots and citizens initiatives, to show that they were not happy with what was happening. There was, for example, the French fries revolution, where people came in the city center of Brussels and started to eat French fries, or other ones men decided not to shave themselves for a while. And in the middle of that, there was this initiative, so the G1000, and people. So first, it began in op-eds in the main newspapers in Belgium, where people from universities to start with, they introduced the fact that today the citizens, they had a very higher than ever educational background, but that they were not able to participate more to political life than it was 100 years ago earlier. So what they decided to do is to randomly select 1,000 citizens and to gather them in a big hall to a taxi in downtown Brussels, in order to, based on an agenda setting that was online, they decided to deliberate in small groups of 8 citizens with facilitators in order to come with recommendations. And those recommendations, the idea was that those recommendations would further be developed by 32 citizens, also randomly selected in those 1,000 and in other groups, and in order to change the political aim. What happened was that between the start of the G1000 and the G32, a federal government was put into place, and so the recommendations had not the same impact that people were expecting. But I should say that it was like a game changer when it comes to political and media attention for deliberative democracy. Still now, 9 years later, when you are discussing with people on the street or elsewhere about deliberative democracy, they are speaking about the G1000, and that was also something we kept in our mind when we decided to launch here, and what we will launch here, the deliberative committees. It was in order to have a bottom-up approach of starting with the citizens and going to the institutions. We decided really based on what happened also in Ireland with the Irish Constitutional Convention to institutionalize within the parliament the citizens' participation. And so we are really looking into what will happen in Brussels, because the different parties, they engage themselves to have at least, now we'll start with 1, but at least 3 committees a year, and we'll see what the follow-up will be, because there is also in the rules of the parliament, there's that idea that it's not only a place where citizens, they can deliberate and discuss, but that's the members of the parliament, because they are the same ones in the permanent committees and participating to the deliberative committees here, that will implement the different recommendations. So that's the link between the G1000 and the presentation of Magali.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. I don't know if you want to add something to move to the other panel, or I don't know.
No, I would prefer to, because I was late for this panel, so okay, I am afraid to be a bit out of the story.
Okay.
I think great.
I'm also Eve.
Yeah, the other Eve.
Oh, there are 3. That's a bit confusing, but since
I think we're running a bit late, so I think Jonathan gives good presentation, so it's fine for me. I'll talk some other day. Okay.
Okay. Merci à tous.
Okay.
So we finished the panel in time.
Thank you, Michele. Apologize for being maybe a bit late for the new session. If Virginia agrees, we can directly move to this next session on citizen assembly, since Mr. Sintomer.
I love when you suggest the things that I said 10 minutes before. So yes, I agree with myself. Go, Lawrence.
Apologize. Anyway, well, I will give the floor now to Mr. Sintomer, Professor Sintomer, who has been teaching a lot on citizen assemblies. I had the chance to attend actually some of his classes in Paris. And at that time, it was almost 4 years ago, it sounded to me maybe a bit strange about hearing about sortition as a key tool in political decision making. Nowadays, at that time, maybe it was my ignorance, but we know that nowadays it's becoming very popular and a lot of countries are using this tool and citizen assemblies. So we'll give you the floor, Professor Saint-Omer. I would like to know why do you think that sortition can be very helpful in political decision making, and also do you think that this moment, this critical moment, is quite appropriate for citizen assemblies around the world?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to discuss with you today. And I mean, it's sympathetic to see that you teach, and sometimes you can discuss a couple of years afterwards with those who were present and on a peer level. I would like first to remember the context. It has been said in the previous session, a crisis of representative democracy. But the context is also that randomly selected citizen assemblies are developing in the global north, not in the global south, basically. There are a few exceptions, but it remains something specific to, say, Western countries or the global north. After this context, I would like to stress one point, which will be my starting point, which is random selection can be used in very different political perspectives. This was the case in the antiquity. It was perhaps with radical democracy in most Athenian history, but it was not the case in Rome. And this is also the case today. It could be used by actors who have quite different ideas of what our society should be and of what our politics should be. I think that at the time being, as it is used now in the last couple of years or decades, there are three main strengths of relying on random selection in politics. The first one is impartiality. Namely, the idea that those who will discuss have no party interests, they are not lobbies, and they represent the diversity of the society, so that they can propose, decide, advise for the common good. This is perhaps the most transhistorical dimension of the use of sortition in politics. The second point, which is also second strength, which is most often used random selection of mini publics, at least, of citizen assemblies, is that it allows a good deliberation, because there is some epistemic diversity, people having different life experiences, coming from different places of society, when usually political elites and experts are coming from a much more restrictive social group. And together with this, the idea is that it's not enough to select people, then they have to discuss and discuss well, so that the moderation of the discussion and the attention to give the floor to anybody and so on and so forth is central. Very often it's much more interesting to see a citizen assembly compared to a parliament. And the third strength is, say, democracy or participatory democracy, the idea that ordinary citizens could give an important input in politics directly, and not only select somebody who will decide for them. So this was my first point. The second point, I will be very brief, is that a lot of topics have been discussed in citizen assemblies and citizen juries and things like this. And I think that when you look at what has been done, it's more interesting to have citizen assemblies on specific issues rather than on very general issues. The basic example is the Irish Citizen Assembly, which had to be, or the two assemblies which had to discuss about 1 or 2 or 3 issues, abortion or not. And the opposite would have been the meetings which have been done at EU level about the future of Europe. And this is a very vague. And to some extent in France, the Citizen Assembly for the Climate is working on a very large issue and probably a too broad issue. My third point is that we have seen 2 waves of randomly selected mini-publics. The first one, which began in the 80s, it was coming top-down. Those who invented the procedures were controlling them. It was decoupled from social movements, and it was a mere addition, a deliberative addition to the political system, to representative government. And deliberative democracy has been very often used during this first wave as a supplement to representative government. Know that I think that we are living in a second phase, a second wave, in which there is a great diversity, there is invention, there are hybrids. What has been described for Brussels a couple of minutes ago is a good example of this. It's inventive. This is the first difference with the first wave, but there are other differences. Very often it also comes not only from the top, but from the bottom in social movements. And it is not opposed to social movements, but it can be coupled with social movements. It is also very often more closely linked to the decision-making process. It is not just advisory, it can be deliberative in the French or Spanish or Italian meaning of the word, namely to take decision or at least to propose things, not just to advise. And I think that this second wave is much more interesting than the first one. My last point is that at the time being, we have, as always, different political imaginaries behind randomly selected citizen assemblies and other randomly selected mini-publics. The first imaginaries of what politics and society could be remain the idea of a deliberative democracy, which is mostly a mere complement to representative democracy. For example, the French president, Emmanuel Macron, had the idea to organize citizen assemblies in all French regions after the Yellow Vests movement. And the idea was we have assemblies, citizen assemblies, but then politics will decide. This remains very often in the head of politicians who try to organize citizen juries or citizen assemblies. There is another perspective, another imaginary, which is very often developed in the grassroots. It is the idea that you have to get rid of the political class. You have to get rid of politicians. And then, to some extent, you will be beyond politics. You will have a society in which you will have individuals discussing for the common good, and who will be able, through citizen assemblies, to take the right decision for the collectivity. But in this vision, you don't have conflicts anymore. You don't have social differences, or you have social differences, but not relations of domination, of power, interest groups. You have a society which is flat, which is diverse, and which just can solve its problems through discussion once the political class is over. And I think you have a third imaginary, which is more linked to some kind of radical democracy, which links deliberative democracy and radical or direct democracy, and which thinks that society is unequal, fragmented among social classes, social groups, and that social movements, protests are important. And in this context, citizen assemblies represent one moment among others in order to try to face the challenges of our society. And for example, you can have proposals which then are voted through a referendum, or citizen initiatives which can propose citizen assemblies and referendums. And I think that in this period, it is important to understand what we want when we organize citizen assemblies and with whom we have allies. We have friends who want to do the same. I think that we experience a huge crisis in each country, but also at EU level, and that we have to be clear. Do we want just to put some more supplément d'âme, some footnote to the representative government at both national and EU level? Do we want to just get rid of the political class and do something quite different in which there won't be any social struggles anymore? Or are we, and this would be my proposal, realistic enough to understand that we have huge, powerful global players, they will remain, and in order to transform society, to face huge crises we are experiencing, we have to add something new, deliberative democracy and citizen assemblies, as one moment among others, which can be important, not just to modify at the margins the status quo, but to really transform both society and politics.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simtomer, especially for explaining that citizen assembly cannot work as a unique tool, a separate tool, but it has to interact with other instruments and citizens' initiative, like, for example, a referendum that you were mentioning. And you also mentioned the example of the Irish Citizen Assembly. That's why I will give the floor to Mr. David Farrell. Hi, David. It's actually the second time that we meet, because the first time was in Rome when we had a presentation of an Italian law of popular initiative for the institution of citizen assembly also in Italy. Now we will restart that campaign in Italy. We were stopped by the emergency. Anyway, I will give you the floor because it's very interesting to know also that there are different possible types of citizen assembly, not only the institutional one, like the French that Mr. Saint-Omer was referring to, but also examples of self-convocated citizen assembly by foundations, for examples. And actually, before becoming an institutional model, the Irish example was a self-convocated citizen assembly. So that's an interesting story for us.
Hello, can you hear me okay? Hello?
Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, because my computer has been having problems.
Yeah, the video seems to be stopped, but we can hear you well.
I think he has dropped out now.
Okay, we can I don't know if David is joining us again. Yes. David, can you try again to speak? Okay, there is apparently a problem with David's connection.
I suggest we move to the next speaker and we...
Yeah, which is Marcin Gerwin from Poland. Can you give us a sign, Marcin, if you're here with us? Okay, I can see you. Okay, great, Marcin. We will then listen to David with the example of the Irish Citizen Assembly. But first, Marcin, you will tell us more about your experience of Citizen Assembly designer. And the question for you was about the idea of a European Citizen Assembly. Do you think that at that moment, it would be appropriate to start thinking about an institutional European Citizen Assembly? And at this regard, I want to also say that with some NGOs, European Alternatives and others, we are considering the idea of a potential self-convocated European Citizen Assembly, which would be more ambitious than the conference of the future of Europe, that at that time we still don't know when it will be convocated. So we would like to know what's your impression and idea of a European Assembly, a Citizen Assembly at the European scale, in order to take notes and see with all these organizations if this is just an utopia or something doable.
All right. So thank you, everyone, and it's a great pleasure actually to be able to speak with you. And I will honestly say I'm very fortunate that I can speak before David, because I have another presentation at 6, so I'm kind of happy about that I can speak earlier. So definitely the European Citizens Assembly is possible. From the technical point of view, from the point of view of whether it is possible to organize it, yes, sure, it has been done, you know, like 2 years ago. So definitely the European Commission has already got an experience with something that they called the Citizens Panel, a group of around 100 people from all EU member states, including United Kingdom, and that time arrived to Brussels, and they talked about what kind of questions should be included in the consultations about the future of Europe. So the topic itself was very easy, very soft, nothing, you know, nothing controversial and so on. Nevertheless, it was a very good experience for the people working for the Commission to see that it works. But people who came there were like normal people, that the discussions were meaningful and the atmosphere was good. I think that generally, in this sense, it was a success. With regards to design, definitely it could be done much more in a different way, so that it would be possible to come to a conclusion. To definitely all citizens' assemblies, as we do it on the local or the national level currently, they include the learning phase, and the same would be included in the European Citizens' Assembly. There are some ideas about the climate change European Citizens Assembly, and definitely this topic is worth exploring at the European level. And nevertheless, there is this challenge of, since it's such a huge and very broad topic, what could be the scope, what could be the a concrete specific question posed to the Citizens Assembly, what should they provide recommendations to? So when I was thinking about the European level, I see 2 options. European Citizens Assembly with binding results. Definitely this is something that we promote in Poland. Most of our local citizens' assemblies are binding, in the sense that the mayor openly says, publicly says, that I will implement recommendations which receive the support of 80% of participants. And at the European level, it could be included in the treaty at some point, and eventually it could be binding. From practical perspective, however, it seems to me that what could be feasible, what could be doable at that moment would be to organize something which would be advisory. advisory. Nevertheless, there should be clear position from the very beginning from the European Commission or the Parliament, ideally both the Commission and the Parliament, that let's say within 3 months or 6 months, there will be a concrete response to the recommendations presented by the European Citizens Assembly, what will happen with them. So with this kind of, basic like statement and attitude from the Commission, that we would like to really look into what we will receive from this process, I think it is worth starting it, even though it would be just advisory. So my suggestion would be with regards to the size composition, just very quickly, I think that the size could be for the advisory model of around 160 people. Why 160? Because 200 might be too much, 100 might be too little. French convention was 150, let's make it something more. 160, okay, not too expensive, very easy to manage. There will be rooms available for such a group of people, okay, plus 30 substitutes. If you have a look how much, if you need to have this criteria that demographic criteria that people from all member states will participate. And if you use the method, which is similar to the finding out what number of members of parliament should be in the parliament from each member state. Germany, for example, if the size is 160, from Germany there would be 20 people, from France 17, from Belgium 5, Spain 13, Poland 12, Netherlands 7, and so on. The main idea that I have with regards to the composition is that at least 1 man and 1 woman should be from each country, including Malta and all the small Cyprus. So and they could meet in person definitely, let's say once for a month. But since we do have already this experience with online deliberation, I think that in between the real in-person face-to-face meetings, the European Citizens Assembly could meet online to expand this learning phase, and actually it would be much more effective. So I would suggest real in-person meetings and in between some online deliberation to enhance the learning phase. Actually, it gives people more time. And then definitely there should be this political support, political buy-in, ideally from the Commission and the European Parliament. The process is not expensive. My honest, I'm speaking about it so lightly because I honestly think that it is easy to organize it. So what is if you have the political support, then you just do it. So, and even when you think about, okay, but how can you run random selection in all EU member states, 27 of them? Actually, that's not difficult as well. So what you could do, the method that works very well is sending letters with invitations to people. For example, in the city of Wrocław in Poland, where we were preparing a citizens assembly recently, there were 20,000 letters sent around the city to households. And since the address of a household is not personal data, it's address of a building, not a person, I think it would be possible to randomly select cities from all member states and also urban, rural areas, villages, and then send out the letters with invitations to randomly selected households there. I think it would be possible to collect those lists of addresses. And then people respond, they call by phone, or they log in on a website and they register. And then you run the process of random selection and you have your group. And all the rest is just like the usual Citizens Assembly process. So that would be my introduction. European Citizens Assembly, definitely doable. Once you have the political backing, you just start it and go.
Oh, thank you, Martin, for all these advices. I'm taking my notes, and we will discuss this because in the 9th of May, that will be a launch event on this idea of a potential European Citizen Assembly. So it's still ongoing, but I think that all those suggestions are very, very useful for this work. So I will give now the floor to Mr. David Farrell for the example of the Irish Citizen Assembly.
Unmute.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm having great fun with technology these days. I am in the middle of a virus problem with my computer that is still not resolved. So it has this wonderful ability to throw me out of meetings without any warning. So I'm now coming to you live from my iPad. I'm glad I was able to hear some of the contributions. Marcin, who I know well, Eve and the other Eve, and Jonathan and others. So it was good to catch up with some old friends. I was asked to say a little bit about the Irish process, and to do so in about 5 or 6 minutes. So I think the way I will set the scene is to draw a contrast with what Jonathan was saying a few moments ago about the G1000. I was very fortunate to be there on the day of the G1000 and to see what a wonderful occasion it was. And it was a good example of what Marcin was just talking about how you can run a process like this across different language groups. But it was very different from the Irish case that ran in the same year, the We the Citizens process that my colleagues and I were involved with. And it was different in a number of ways. It was different in terms of size and language issues. But it was also different in the way that I describe it as a sort of like a slow casserole, something you put into your lower oven on a very slow heat. And the G1000 had huge success, but over a very long period of time. And in many ways, that has given the opportunity for the sort of thing that Jonathan was talking about, for the folk involved in the G1000 to still be engaged, as what Yves Sintemer was talking about the second wave of innovators and working from the bottom up and trying to push within Belgium for more reform. Whereas the Irish experiment that my colleagues and I were involved with was something that was cooked very quickly, and it had very quick success, to the extent that, in a sense, what we have seen evolve in Ireland is the Irish government have effectively taken over the Citizens' Assembly model and now run it themselves. So whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm happy to discuss, but let me sort of give you a bit more now about the context. So 2009, we had the terrible economic recession. We had the crisis. Always at the heart of these stories is a crisis, isn't it? So we had our crisis. Our economy was in a mess. Our political system was greatly challenged. There were a lot of angry citizens on the streets. And so just like the G1000 folk, we went and decided as political scientists that we would try and have some voice in this and try and see if we could encourage a process of engagement with those angry citizens. So we were very lucky to attract substantial funding from an organization called Atlantic Philanthropies, it was set up by a very wealthy Irish American. And there were no strings attached. They basically approached us. They said, we like what you are writing about in opinion pieces and what we hear from you on the radio. We want to fund an experiment that you will run yourselves, and we will not be in control. We will just give you the funding. And that's exactly what happened. They gave us very generous funding. We set up an organization called We the Citizens. Our website is still up and running. And our mission was to just show the method. So this is another area where we were different from the G1000 in their original experiment. We were all about the method. We didn't really have much of an agenda about what needed to change in Irish politics. We just wanted to provoke the government to adopt this method so that they could then start a discussion about constitutional and political reform. And so throughout the year of 2011, we went all around the country. Our funding, as I said, was generous, to organize these roadshows, these participatory processes, which allowed us to get in a sense of what the Irish people were thinking about that they would like to discuss. And that was how we developed our own agenda for our experiment in the summer of 2011, the We the Citizens Assembly, the first Citizens Assembly in Ireland, completely organized on a self-convened basis. It was organized by political scientists. To the outside world, many people thought this was a social movement. The reality was that this was a social science experiment. We had control groups, we had our experimental group, which was the Citizens' Assembly, and we were able to produce empirical evidence that demonstrated what we already know as political scientists, which is that citizens, when informed and educated on difficult topics, will shift their opinions, may not shift their opinions, but can shift their opinions, will be prepared to embrace difficult decisions if necessary, and will feel more emboldened and satisfied as citizens in a democracy. And so we then, the final stage of our project was we then had meetings, one-on-one meetings with the leader of every single political party in Ireland to provide our findings and to try and persuade them to adopt this process. And this is what happened. This was the quick fry, the quick cooking thing that we ended up with. The Irish government embraced it. And they set up from that the Irish Constitutional Convention in 2012. This was seen to be a success. As you may know, marriage equality referendum, a few other things that followed from that. So in 2016, they set up the second process, the Irish Citizens' Assembly, that discussed, as Eve said, a number of topics, including abortion. So we had the abortion referendum. So now, late last year, they set up a third process, the current Irish Citizens' Assembly on Gender Equality, whose work has just had to be suspended now for the next few months because of the COVID crisis, but it will return when they can in the future. And so what we have in that sense, as I was saying at the start of my remarks, and this is where I'll finish in a moment, something that is very different, I think, from the G1000 slow casserole model is that the civil servants have become very familiar with this approach. They now know how to run it themselves, or they believe they do. The politicians like it because it gives them a device to try and help to deal with some difficult subjects that are not so easy to deal with within the parliament. And so it now is effectively usurped by the political system for its own uses, for good or ill. So it has some merits, but I'm happy in the Q&A if you want me to go into some of the downsides of that. So that's a sort of introduction to the Irish case, but I'll stop now.
Thank you very much, David. And I think particularly for underlining the fact that the crisis, in the case of the economic crisis in Ireland, and maybe we can think about the current COVID crisis in Europe, this is a particularly appropriate moment to think about citizen assembly, and this is why I think it would be important to think about it also at the European scale, and this is helping us to introduce the next interventions from two MEPs, Mr. Gabriel Bischoff and Mrs. Gabriel Bischoff and Mr. Daniel Freund from the Social and Socialist and Democrats group and from the Green group. I will give the floor first to Ms. Bischoff for an overview of the European Parliament proposals on the issue of the conference on the future of Europe, considering that nowadays we still don't know when this meeting will be convened, and maybe yes, we should consider the fact that this is the good moment to relaunch this event.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to discuss with you here. Listened quite carefully and will describe a little bit the idea and where we stand in the European Parliament. And I mean, it was one of the key promises Commission President von der Leyen gave the Parliament when she was a candidate to be the president of the Commission, to organize a conference on the future of Europe. There was not much more information except that it was an idea already longer around in certain groups and also in the Parliament. And so it was very clear from the beginning that the Parliament wanted to be in the leading seat, designing this conference. And so rightly started, the proposal was done in July by von der Leyen, and so we started in September to set up a working group to come up with a proposal for the Parliament on this conference on the future of Europe. And the idea from the beginning was to have a small working group for the COP, the Conference of Presidents, to come up with a proposal, and then later on to have a resolution that would be voted by the whole Parliament. And the idea was that this proposal then would be something like the mandate for the President of the Parliament, David Sassoli, in the negotiation with the two other presidents. You know, in this multi-level game that we have a lot of actors here, and this made it quite an interesting process, to say. So our idea was we had one responsible from every political group to be in this working group together with the president. So it was Daniel, who will later on speak for the Greens. It was me for the S&D group, and a couple of others. But as you might anticipate, this also meant that in this small working group of 7, there were also 2 political groups that have a different approach to the question on the future of Europe than the other 5, but nevertheless we started working and got a broad consensus that it should really be a bottom-up approach. And what we did, on one hand, we evaluated the process of the last convention, and we had a look what worked well, what didn't work well, and also there about the involvement of civil society. And on the other hand, we looked at the examples we have, mostly on national level, on sort of the kind of deliberative processes that were presented before. So we had the idea to come up with a proposal where we would have, on one hand, an institutional setting similar to the last convention, but that we would link it to citizens' agoras, and also by people selected randomly. But the idea was not to have one huge citizen agora and to discuss the whole future of Europe, but from the experience we look at, we knew that it would be very essential to have a very focused issues. So the Parliament identified about 6 thematic issues, and then to say on all 6 areas, and there might be even more because the citizens think that also other priorities are there, we would install for each of this topic a citizen agora, and that would be selected not by the governments, but by also we looked at the experience, independent institutional actors like universities, whatever, but with very defined criteria so that they would really represent the European societies. And that meant not only gender, not only the regional aspects, but also the socio-economic background, because what we also saw is that in many of these processes, the barriers for some people are higher than for others. So we wanted to have it most inclusive, and also the education background, so that it's in the end not an assembly of academics, or that it should be in terms of representation in society, really mirroring the society, also because we think that this will be very important for the quality of the proposals later to reflect this diversity of European societies. And then to create a link that was the more complicated part also in the debates between the work in the citizens' agoras and the work of the institutional panel or convention, so that we make sure that the proposals that come from the agoras will be presented in the institutional panel, and that they also have to deal with these recommendations and also give a feedback in the end if it was taken on board or if not, and why, and all of this, and that in the end we know about the process of the last convention to come up with in the end a set of proposals for either policy changes but also, as necessary in certain areas, on treaty changes. This process was designed in a way to say it is not a convention. It is it's a different form, and because we have very clear formal constraints what a convention is, how it can be inaugurated and everything, but that what the results are there could be transferred then into also formally a convention. We have a situation in Europe that we have a lot of governments that don't want treaty changes. We can also see within the different groups that we have the ones that think treaty changes are necessary, others who are very reluctant to do so and to leave it open. And we also had age as one of the criteria in the selection of these agoras, but we thought in addition to these thematic agoras, we would like to have one only with young people from 16 to 25. We looked at the debates, the Fridays for Future, the others, to have a European panel of young people representative for European young people would be also very important, and so that they have a voice in this process. There were some misunderstandings around it. We still would have young people in the normal agoras, but we would on top of that have a specially composed agora with younger people to bring in their proposal into this debate. Indeed, we don't know what is going to happen. We proposed to have the starting point on the 9th of May, and we have the resolution of the parliament that was voted with broad majority, which is good. Then we have the communication of the Commission that is not very ambitious in my view, and they were very critical about this form of citizens agora. They think it's too complicated, it's too costly, and all of that. And we have a council that not yet could agree on a mandate, and they had postponed it and postponed this. And then Corona came, so we now are at a stage where we need a clear signal if it's not the 9th of May to start, which is obvious. What will be the starting point after summer, and especially that it will not be the victim of Corona in the end, that it will not take place. But I think the current crisis shows that such a conference on the future of Europe, in my view, is needed more than ever to have a capable union that is able also to act. Maybe I stop here.
Oh, thank you very much, Ms. Bishop, for sharing us all this information on the European Parliament proposals, and for because acknowledging us also about at what point we are regarding the discussion on the Conference of the Future of Europe. I hope you will be able to stay until the end of the session, because maybe a lot of people could ask more information about it. That's very precious for us. I will give the floor now to another MEP, Mr. Daniel Freund, which will also give us a perspective on this from the Green group at European Parliament.
Thanks for inviting me, and great that we're having this discussion. I think between Gabi Bischoff and myself on the content of things, we're not very far from each other, right? We wrote the Parliament position together. We developed this model of, you know, how can we bring randomly selected citizens' assemblies into this construct of the European. Well, on the conference on the future of Europe, we did that together, and I think, at least for the time being, the conflict lines really, at least in the European Parliament, for the most, do not run between the political groups, at least not the, let's say, democratic or, you know, between the very left and the conservatives. There is no divisions. Part of the left, of the very left, sort of are skeptical of the EU as well, but at least the political group of the GUE that was also represented in the working group was very constructive and worked with us on this all the way to the EPP. This was all fine, and the only groups that fell out of this effort in the European Parliament, as Gabi said, was the ID and the ECR. And so the conflict lines are much more well, partly with the other institutions, but I would say with the member states for the time being. And maybe to take a step back, so having worked on questions of EU reform for many years, my feeling was sort of until about 2 years ago, if you mentioned the word treaty change or fundamental reforms, people always said, oh, you're crazy and this is not the time, right? Either it was the economic crisis, afterwards it was the migration crisis, but it was never the time to really address fundamental questions. And I think to a certain degree, we see that coming back to haunt us every time again that a new issue emerges. And we see it again now in the Corona crisis, that there seem to be, to some extent, different ideas of what the European Union fundamentally is and how much are we in this together or not, right? When a crisis like a virus hits, are we in this together and do we help out each other? Do those that are less affected help out those that are more affected, or is it everyone for themselves? And is this just a loose connection, a talking shop with you know, relatively weak institutions, little money that loses more and more relevance in the world? And my view has always been, you know, there's continental challenges that are better addressed together, or maybe even only addressed together. If we want to tax large multinational corporations like Amazon, Germany can't do it alone. Estonia definitely can't do it alone. And the only chance that I see maybe to tax those kind of companies is if we do it together as Europeans, and if we basically say, you know, we're the largest market in the world, and if you want to access this, you have to play by our rules. And it's the same for defending our values in the world. It's the same for tackling climate change or being a leader as a continent in climate change. All this means we have to be together on this, or basically not play a role. And so I think the debate has opened up more, and the European elections last year showed that very clearly, that there was an appetite to have such a debate. So I'm very glad that we took the opportunity, and as the European Parliament came forward with an ambitious position on how such a debate should look like, bringing in new, I think relatively still on the European level, innovative ways with these random citizens' assemblies. I, for instance, tried to learn a lot from the different citizens' assemblies that have taken place across Europe. The Irish example was already mentioned, the French example as well. There have been lots of successful random citizens' assemblies also at regional or local level, including in my country, in Germany. And we try to sort of bring the best experiences together, try to learn from that, and reflect on how can we really bring this to the European level, because obviously it does present a few added challenges, not least in terms of language and different cultures, different backgrounds that are way more diverse than, let's say, in an Irish context. Now the big question, as we said, is will we manage, and will the other institutions, will member states accept this and go into this? And if they do, for me, in a way, this conference on the future of Europe then becomes the forum to see, to find out what is our common understanding of what the European Union should be or shouldn't be, and hopefully by that debate create enough public pressure for whatever the outcome of that conference is, that we get the necessary majorities to actually move in that direction. I think naturally that at least on some policy areas that will mean more integration. It might well mean on other policy areas that we bring those back closer to the people, but at least we should have that discussion. I think the model that we suggested, and Gabi already explained some of the logics behind that, but I think there's really some important thinking in terms of not leaving everything just to citizens, because I think that would overburden them, and we need the buy-in of political institutions. We need the buy-in of member states for this to work, because of the way the treaties currently work, because the way that constitutions in every single member state work. For me, this is not a revolution, right? This is not the citizens take over and we burn down government. It is a reform process, right? So we need to involve all those actors that currently hold power. But I think bringing in these new elements, it can really change the process from what we have seen in the past. And I think we had some quite detailed ideas already in the working group of how this could work, how big citizens' assemblies should be, how the language can be dealt with, and so on. And happy to go into that in more detail during the question. One thing I would like to react on also from the previous speakers, and something also that the Commission has sort of alluded to recently, that this idea of, do we have to go online now because of COVID? And I think it's sort of, it has its advantages, but I think it also has some severe disadvantages. And I don't know about you guys, I'm spending a lot of time now in online conferences and webinars and so on. And I see, that works to some extent, but it also has some very severe limitations. And I think for an exercise like this, European Citizens' Assemblies that already under normal conditions would have been a very, very difficult exercise. And I'm not sure that taking this online first is really going to produce the kind of outcome that at least I was hoping to get from this conference. I also think that starting the conference on a much less ambitious scale just to start it is also not the right approach, because it will mean that it will remain basically as at a much lower, less ambitious level. And I think there's too many people out there that from the beginning were afraid of having this conference. There were too many people that just wanted to have another citizens dialogues, right? Some sort of complaints box that you put out there or carry around the union, where people put in all the points that they always wanted to say that they don't like about the European Union. At the end of the day, nobody cares, right? Or you have all the arguments and their opposite, and then political decision makers can again just decide on what they want or don't want. So I would rather wait a little bit until the current pandemic blows over and then do it for real. Preparing this was always going to take quite some time, right? Setting up an assembly, we have seen France, it takes 4, 5, 6 months from the moment that you hit the go button to the assembly actually can start. So on a European scale, this will be far more difficult than in a single country. So I would strongly advocate to rather take the time to prepare this well, do it well, rather than just start something for the sake of starting something, but then it doesn't really go anywhere in the end. So I'm going to finish my intervention with saying that we really need all of you. We can only make this happen if there is strong support from civil society, from citizens out there. So do join us in putting pressure on everyone that that this conference actually does happen, that it does happen in an ambitious way, the way the European Parliament suggested it, and do feel free to make all the amendments, the feedback, and so on that you have on the way that the Parliament proposed it to make it even better. Thanks.
Thank Mr. Freund. Thank you very much for all the energies you are spending for relaunches this European debate, and maybe before relaunching this, we can relaunch the debate between us in this meeting. But before this, I will give the floor maybe to Virginia if she has something to say.
Thank you, Lorenzo, and thanks to everyone. It was really important to hear all the different perspectives. I just want to, because we were supposed to finish at 5:45, so depending on the availability of the speakers, but I would give around 15 minutes, 20 minutes for a round of comments and questions. So if the speakers at least have time to reply.
I have 10 minutes I can do, then okay. I have to go into the next.
Okay, so for the whole assembly, let's say that we have time for questions and comments until 6:20. For those of you who have direct questions to the speakers, let's do it immediately so that there is a bit of time, and let's keep the comment to 1 minute. And then at 6:20, we wrap it up and we share the plans for tomorrow, etc., etc.
I have to say that I have to leave. I have another meeting at 6, and maybe I can be there late for 5 minutes. But so if you have any immediate questions to me, feel free, or otherwise I'm sure that Daniel can answer them also, because there are not many differences in our positions.
Okay, Lorenzo, if you want to guide the questions.
Yeah. You can all write your names in the chat for the questions, and I will give you the floor. I don't know if there is any question at the moment. No, of course, maybe I do have one. Virginia Flume.
I do have one for the MEPs, which is how does the official process works on confirmation of delay of the conference on the future of Europe? Because I think a lot of civil society organization movements are waiting for this moment, trying to find ways to contribute, to influence. Some of the organizations that are gathered here today are working on events around the 9th of May, hoping for the conference. So I would like to understand if there is a bureaucratic, in the better sense of the word possible, series of steps that will tell what happens with the conference on the future of Europe.
Shall I? On the official process. So the European Parliament has voted a first position. The Commission has adopted something as well. We're waiting for the Council to adopt their position on this. It was supposed to happen just before Corona hit. Now they have been delaying it. A bit unclear when exactly that will happen. Once they do adopt the position, we're supposed to have negotiations among the three institutions to agree on what is this conference, how is it going to function. At least our thinking in the Parliament was then that there would be a steering body created that has representatives of the three EU institutions and possibly also representatives of national parliaments, and that steering group would then organize the concrete logistics of the conference itself. As we said, on the one hand, the institutional sort of plenary, if you want, and on the other hand, the citizens' assemblies. So when is it the right time for you to bring in your points, and to whom? It depends a bit on what your points are on, right? If it's content points on, let's say, if there is a debate in the Citizens' Assembly, but also in the institutional plenary on climate change or on migration or whatever the topics are that are going to be picked, that's for a bit later. However, if you have recommendations on the institutional setup of the conference, on the functioning of that conference, then now is the moment to come with those proposals. you can always come to us as members of the European Parliament, but at this point would probably be more impactful to go to the governments, to the member states and council, since they are the ones that are usually skeptical on many of the more ambitious ideas that float around on the conference.
Maybe we do it together toward the council.
Great. We have now a second question from Professor Lewansky. Hi, Rodolfo.
Ciao, Samuele. Hello, everybody. It's not a question, actually. I said I had a comment listening to the entire discussion. Very interesting. Thank you for organizing it. There's a connection, a bridge, sort of, between what we heard from the Swiss colleague Bruno Kaufmann earlier, and from Yves Saint-Omer and others about the deliberative approach. I mean, this sort of Oregon model where you have a deliberative moment and then you also have a direct democracy moment with a referendum. And in my view, this is what can give utmost legitimacy to real decisions, to binding decisions, as Nelson was saying earlier. So today, thinking of many publics based on sortition, in my experience, for example, in the Tuscany region, the perception of legitimacy is low, both by the political elites and by the people in general. Nobody's used to this. This is innovative. Coupling together direct and deliberative democracy instead might be a stronger solution to have decisions that will then be able to actually put into will be enforced, can be actually implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Lewansky. You also mentioned your experience in Tuscany with the participation institutes, and I think that today we have put a lot of things on the table from a lot of experts. Also, I would like to remind that we are recording this event, and also that thanks to Octavian of the human staff, we are taking notes, and so we will see how to transform all this knowledge in a political proposal, and of course we will then share it on the internet. Okay, maybe a question also, if anybody else has have any other feedback.
May I raise a question?
Yes, definitely.
Actually, I have two questions. The first one is for Mrs. Mill and Mr. Freund. Do you think it will really matter if these agoras are organized? It won't be just talk and business as usual. It's a provocative question, but the former citizen assemblies, well, they were not called like this, but at EU level, were really well organized, but it was just talk. It was not influential in EU politics. And the second question is to David. David, how do you explain that it was taken seriously by the institutions in Ireland?
I'm afraid Mr. Farrell will not respond to the second question because he had to go, but sorry, Mr. Friend, the floor is yours.
Well, I've looked at the Irish example quite a bit, and I think, I mean, my reading so far, why were the Irish assemblies so successful is that in a way, what happened in the assemblies themselves with the whatever 100, 150 people that were in them, the kind of reflection process and the deliberation process that had happened there particularly on the contentious issues on marriage for all and abortion was carried out into the Irish population, and the entire Irish population in a way went through what the few randomly selected citizens in the assemblies went through, and then at the end you had large majorities that voted in the referenda based on the recommendations by the Assembly. So that, I guess, is the trick to play, right? Do we manage in these European Citizens' Assemblies to come to a position that then satisfies a large majority of Europeans? I guess with the added difficulty, it doesn't only have to be a large majority of Europeans, but it has to be a large majority kind of in each European country, the way that we're institutionally set up, right? If, for example, even if you have a large majority, but all of Eastern Europe is out, or all of Northern Europe is out, or something, then it will be difficult. But if we do manage to carry this out, that this is not just a citizens' assembly that takes place and nobody notices, then I think we will fail. But if a large chunk of Europeans hear about us doing this and follow the arguments, and thereby we create enough pressure on all politicians to actually accept the results of the assembly and the recommendations that come out of it, then I think there's a chance that something does come out. I think for me, when I'm asked what is a successful conference on the future of Europe, I don't think that within a 2-year time span we can solve all the issues that Europe ever had, right? That is not going to happen. But if on one of the big contentious issues, I don't know whether it will be migration, I don't know whether it will be climate change or taxation or own resources for the EU or a change to the way that European democracy functions, I don't know which the issue is that we can make a success at the end. But if on one of these issues we manage to unblock the current non-progress on some of these issues, then I think the process in its entirety will be a success, and I think then it will also be repeated. So if it is a success, then I think people will say, oh, these citizens' assemblies are wonderful, we're going to do it again. The way that it happened in Ireland, right? After they had a first and then a second successful one, obviously they said, let's do it again and have a third one and probably a fourth afterwards. Because, well, the success of the process is there. However, if we fail and if this doesn't lead to anything in the end, people will say, oh, let's not do that ever again. Pretty much the way that the process around the EU constitution and then the Lisbon Treaty has, in a way, for now, killed treaty change, right? Because people are saying it's impossible. You're going to have referenda, you're going to lose them. Let's not do that ever again. And that was for a long time the discourse, right? And now we're trying to break that again because we do need some fundamental changes to the EU.
Thank you, Mr. Freund. As I said, I'm afraid that David Farrell is not here to answer to the second question of Mr. Saint-Omer. So the next one on the list is Cesare.
Hello, everyone. Everything you're talking about, we're already doing it, and we're doing it better than any of all this discussion could ever amount to. The best citizen assemblies are decentralized, self-organized, self-selected. That's exactly what we're doing. It's people coming together to discuss various ideas, but we're using a new technology, and it's the worldwide stock market of ideas. With the technology of the stock market, we're able to aggregate people's ideas because people participate by making their own political philosophies out of various ideas. So we're able to aggregate those ideas to show which ideas people support the most, and then to actually cross-reference that against people's input, the collective public will against people's individual input to nominate representatives of the public will, and ultimately rally to get them elected into public offices. We haven't done that yet, but we already do have a candidate. So I'd like to invite you all to participate in our process. It's always a very constructive, well, it's just people sharing ideas. It's actually a lobby session. That's what it turns into, is because people have ideas that they've thought about, that they've carefully developed, and they seek the support, solicit the support of other citizens for their ideas. That's how we work. Every citizen becomes a lobbyist. Every citizen really becomes a philosopher more than anything. So yeah, I shared some information about that. I hope you can join us today. If not, the next Citizen Assembly is on Sunday. So, and then next Thursday, until we have more leaders, more organizers who will organize them at other times accessible to more people at different locations, different time zones, until we have the world. Thank you.
Lorenzo, unfortunately, I'll have to leave. Thanks so much. And if anyone wants to be updated regularly, at least on our work in the Parliament, send me an email. I put the info in the chat. Thanks, guys. Bye now.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. We still have a person on the list. It's Nicola Air. I will ask you, Nicola, to stay in 3 minutes. Yeah, if you can stay in 3 minutes, and then I would say, if there is no one else.
There is Michele. There is Michele. Nicola and Michele.
Okay. Nicola, then Michele. Okay, right.
I try. The question is, how can we inform the European people that we have the possibility of being able to collect signature 1 million to have a law discussion in the European Parliament? How can we make them understand that this initiative are true? Could signature collection have a positive impact with popular initiative law? I hope that you understand. My English is not so well. Not so good.
Thanks, Nicola. We can go on with the question, and maybe also with the help of Marco Cappato in the conclusions, we'll try to respond to these questions. Michele Fiorillo?
Yes. Marcin is not here, neither Daniel, but by the way, I think about the European Citizen Assembly idea and possible implementation, a way would be to self-organize. As Lorenzo said, we are trying to launch with many organizations this on 9th of May process, and making the self-organized process in dialogue with institutions, showing that could be a possible new institution, not in opposition to the others, but as an integration of the others. I think, for instance, to be concrete, I don't know if there is the other MP still here, but the European Parliament in Strasbourg. Okay. The European Parliament in Strasbourg, or the one also in Brussels, could be, in fact, the place where you could gather this self-organized citizen assembly. So if many organizations are saying we are organizing this, and the European Parliament say, okay, please come in the home of European citizens, which is the European Parliament in a way, to do it, that would be de facto an alliance already between the most democratic institution, because elected directly by citizens, and this self-organized process that in that way could influence at best the conference on the Europe when will be organized. About the online, I think I agree that true deliberation should be made also among persons they meet at least sometime in person, but at the moment we cannot organize such a thing, and we don't know still when will be possible to meet again and to gather many people together. And I'm afraid if we wait too much, the momentum maybe to organize such a thing will pass, and we don't know what can happen to Europe. Maybe we will have other Orbans around, something in Slovenia is going on. Italy, it's in a dangerous situation for when there will be election, maybe. So I think we need to start this process online. We have not other possibilities at the moment, and event like this show that it's possible in a way to organize this kind of stuff. Also, more than 120, I think, could be also 500 people. This European assembly, citizen assembly, also to give representation to different ideas, different social class for all Europe. But okay, that was a more a remark than a question.
Thank you, Michele. I cannot see any other person register for question or suggestions. Apart from Iago, he has personal question to Cesare. I hope, yeah, you will be able to answer in the comments in the chat. Virginia, if you want to say something, and
No,
we
I
go to the
think we
conclusion.
can, yeah, I think we can go toward the conclusion. Thanks everyone for the focus and the concentration. It was a very intense and I think inspiring session. Before going to the logistics for tomorrow, I wanted to make sure that, I mean, I think we had a bit of time for conversation and we will have a plenary tomorrow again, but I don't know if Marco, Lorenzo want to add something. Otherwise, I think we can close.
Oh, just the answer to Nicola, there is no answer. How can we inform the people? How can we assure to be effective with the European Citizen Initiative? There is no a recipe for a solution. It's a political fight. And I think that a part of the answer is the connection between the debate of today and the debate of tomorrow. Because today we have discussed about methods. Tomorrow we are discussing about issues. These two elements should always be combined, because to discuss the methods without the issues, the discussion risks to remain cold, to remain in a way only institutional in a way, no? But at the same time, to have a political fight without caring about reforming institution is a short-sighted way of seeing. Maybe you win your battle today, but you are not able to reform the wider picture. Only if you combine the two together, you innovate democracy, but you activate the tools that you already have, then you can create the political environment and to join forces between different campaigns in order to make institutions more democratic. I think the connection between the debate of this afternoon and the debate of tomorrow morning is exactly what we need to do some step forward toward the event of the 9th of May.
Thank you, Marco. I get this opportunity to add something on this point, and also Elena Sofia Graziani is asking, would it be a good idea to invest in a communication campaign to inform more European citizens? This is exactly the idea that we launched after Bruno Kaufmann intervention. We, as you know, or as it should be clear now, what the Council on Participatory Democracy tries to do is to come up with applications of participatory democracy to specific issues. So last edition, we did it on the coronavirus crisis with the You Can Do It petition. And one of the options for this council is to come up with another petition to the European Parliament on the topic of information, a granular level of information, direct mailing, direct messages that goes to all European citizens about European citizen initiatives and other forms of activation of participatory democracy. So in the chat, you have a link for a draft analysis that can be transformed in a petition to the European Parliament, exactly on the topic that Nicola and Elena are raising. Because at the end of the day, the results of a European citizen initiative can't be left to the spent capabilities of a committee, the big money that you can put on the table to invest in Facebook advertising or email addresses. There should be a level of public information that is guaranteed to all European citizens. So I invite those of you who are still here to have a look at that. Maybe it's something we can collaboratively work on, and also for the people that will watch this online. Conclusion of the day, it's been a long afternoon. So we are going to meet again tomorrow morning at 9:30, starting with a special session on the European Citizens for the Rule of Law. I hope you can join, and also others will do, because the meeting is called after the conclusion of a European Citizen Initiative for the Rule of Law. So we're going to discuss how the instruments was used and which other instruments can be activated for that. Then we will have 2 parallel sessions, and you will receive the link for that later on. One on civil freedoms with a specific angle on cannabis legalization, and another one on environmental policies and carbon pricing. Sorry, I forgot. At 11, from 11:30, the panel on transnational politics and activism. Then the 2 sessions, and then a closure with a general debate with no speakers, but just us talking about the different initiatives and try to put together ideas on the information topic, the conference on the 9th of May, and other things. I invite all of you to have a look at the Humans Face Petition instrument, which is the way how we're going to bring to the European Parliament the supporters of the You Can Do It petition. I think it's all for now. You will receive an email from me with the details for tomorrow. And thanks a lot for everyone who joined, the speakers and the organizers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye bye. Ciao.
See you tomorrow.
Ora si registrerà la